call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting of the East Troy School District Board of Education and all other meetings of the board are open to the public in compliance with state statute. Notice of the meeting has been sent to the media and or has been publicly posted in an attempt to make the citizens of the district aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
I will make the motion to approve the agenda as posted.
Okay, any discussion on the agenda? All right, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda's approved.
I will make the motion for the approval of the minutes from the April 12th, 2021 regular board meeting, as well as the April 19th, 2021 special board meeting.
Okay, any discussion or changes to the meeting minutes? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, first item is the reorganization of the East Troy Community School District Board. First item is swearing of our recently elected members. So, just want to stand up and raise your right hand and repeat your oath of office.
I am Cephalus Janis, having been elected to the office of school board member, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability. So help me God.
I, Dale Lane, have been elected or appointed to the office of school board member, but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof, swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability, so help me God.
All right, the next item is the election of the officers. First one is president.
Ted, would you like me to go through kind of every position of the past, so everyone kind of knows where everybody was at?
Sure.
All right. So, going into this, up to this date and time, current president was Ted Zess, vice president was Bob Dignan, clerk was Steve Lambrix, treasurer was Jessica Fuchs, CISA representative was Tony Barrett, WASB, which is Wisconsin Association of School Board delegate, was Bob Dignan. Committee appointees, student learning subcommittee was Ted and Tony. Operational subcommittee was Bob and Jessica. And we do not need a negotiations, we have not needed a negotiations representatives for a while, but if we did, if any of our representatives of employees decided to once again form a union, we would need to have a negotiation representative, so I always like to have that in case it were to ever be done. And last year it was Tony and Ted that were within that area. So again, nominations do not require a second. It's just nominations, and it's one of the very few times that a board member can nominate themselves for a position or on a committee. So, but they do not need a second, but Ted will need to, when somebody gets nominated, ask 3 times, is there any other nominations? 3 different times for a statute.
All right, back to elections of officers. Is there any nominations for president?
Ted?
Okay, any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All right. Want to vote on these all together or one at a time? Okay. All right. All in favor of me being president for another year, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Vice President, do we have any nominations?
I would like to nominate Anna Janis as vice president.
Okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All right. All in favor of Anna as vice president, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Nominations for clerk.
I'd like to nominate Steve Lambricks for clerk.
Okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor of Steve Lambricks for clerk, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Nominations for treasurer. Okay. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? One more time. Any other nominations? All in favor of Bob for treasurer, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. CISA representative. These we really don't need nominations for, I don't think, just, yeah. Anybody like to be a CISA representative?
It's a great
That's the
opportunity to
organization.
learn.
It's the local school districts in our area. We're a group. I don't know, what does it actually stand for, CISA?
Cooperative Educational Services Agency.
Yeah, there it is.
So, and there's 12 of them throughout the state, so obviously they make up different regions throughout the state where each district within those regions oftentimes will work with CISAs to either possibly share services or form services with another district, and they do a nice job of always continually trying to offer programming for districts. So,
I'd nominate myself for that.
Okay, perfect.
Good.
Sounds good, Dale, thank you. We just need one for that, don't we?
yeah.
Okay.
And Dale?
Yeah.
Steve actually has a letter ready to give to you.
And the WASB delegate, this is the Wisconsin Association of School Boards.
I'd like to do that.
Okay, perfect, Anna. Thank you. Committee appointments, Student Learning Subcommittee. Anybody like to volunteer? Two members on this.
I would do that.
Okay. Bob? Anna? All right, perfect. And the Operational Subcommittee, which I don't think has met in the last year, but you never know.
I think you'd be good on that one.
I'd see that meeting more regularly again.
Okay. All right. Dale, you said you would?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Steve, you interested, or otherwise I'll take it? Okay. And negotiations representative. And like Chris said, we don't need one right now, but you never know if something comes up.
If there was a recertification.
Okay.
I've got quite a bit of experience with union shops and everything, so I understand the contract.
Okay. Sounds good, Dale. And Steve, you said you would also? All right, perfect. Thanks, everybody. We'll move on to public participation. Is there anybody that would like to speak tonight? Okay. Move on to financial report.
All right. At this time, I move the approval of the March 2021 payments in the amount of $1,725,054.55 and receipts in the amount of $2,884,700 $716.81 as reflected on the attached financial statements.
Okay, any discussion, questions for Kathy, or?
I have a few questions.
Okay,
I'd like to talk about this.
sure.
I do have some questions about it. Page 14, local home tax.
Much like property taxes come from homeowners, mobile tax comes from mobile homeowners. Yes.
I didn't realize we had mobile home.
Well, in the vicinity of the school district of East Troy, there are a couple different mobile homes.
Okay. Learn a bit more.
Correct, it's under revenue. It's not that we don't own them. It's people living in mobile homes. That's the taxes they pay. Okay, yeah.
Then another couple questions here.
Sure.
Is our electric bill, did I read that correctly, it would be 50,000 a month? That's correct, I read that somewhere.
I'd have to look. We have several electric and gas bills because we have a lot of different meters for all the different schools buildings.
$417 for greenhouse gas.
Mhm.
Is that for the greenhouse that's out there?
Correct, that's a separate meter.
And monthly phone bills, we have cellular phone bills that are one year for $782 a month.
So I think that's our internet for Wi-Fi hotspots that we're providing for kids who are virtual this year. It runs through our US cellular bill, but it's not a cell phone.
Okay,
It comes, again, with that bill, but that, I know.
something that's going to go away.
Well, that's a great question. You know, again, that's one of the COVID-related expenditures that will have to be discussed as time progresses. But right now, kids who didn't have internet at home, who needed to access virtually, were provided Wi-Fi hotspots when the time COVID hit, that all school districts did that.
And I see group life plan,
That's our life insurance.
and I see retiree life,
Yes. Some,
I see pension life plan.
yes. Yep, so we have the pension and then the retiree broken out into two separate bills because it's two different groups. One, we used to have a different life insurance company, and we bid out and changed life insurance companies, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. So I have one group of retirees that have a slightly different plan, and then I have a new group of retirees, and so they're on two separate bills, but they're both labeled, again, the retiree and the pension because they're both retirees. Yes. Yes, correct. Roughly, I would say, I think I have one, maximum two on the newest. And then the oldest grandfathered, possibly 6 to 8 are still remaining.
So are we still putting more people on this type of as they retire? Are we still putting more people on these life insurance plans?
On the life insurance, yes, because there are current language in contracts that says when they retire, they would have the paid-up life insurance.
How about this pension life plan? Pension or this retire, or, the pension life plan, what is that? It says pension life plan.
Yes. So I guess, I'm sorry, I thought I answered that. It's life insurance for retirees that
Okay,
have it
okay,
in their
I understand.
contract.
All right. Because we have a retiree life, and we have a
Yep.
pension life plan.
Two different bills, I have it segregated because it was two different groups when we changed carriers, and we had to kind of account for them differently. So I like to keep them separate so that I know who's still on the very old grandfathered plan from Plan A and who is from the newer Plan B.
So, you said that we add people
Yes.
as they retire, is that correct? And we're under.
Some, only those that have it written into their contracts.
Okay, so does each teacher have its own separate contract?
No,
or don't?
teachers don't have it.
Okay, who has the contracts?
So administrators and supervisors, if again they have it in their contracts, then they have it.
Okay, so the teachers do not have it? only-
Teachers do not have it.
Okay, I get it. How long those contracts run for? Renewed every year, 5 years, 10 years?
Administrator supervisors?
Yes.
Every 2 years now.
They do renew them? Who negotiates those contracts? The person and the superintendent
And the board.
and the board?
Mhm.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. I do want to talk a little bit about that utility bill. I don't know where it's at. I thought it was on page 14, the We Energy bill. Do you have that?
On page 14 is revenues.
Yeah, I thought there's somewhere in here I was looking at a utility bill to We Energies.
Yes, I'm sure it's a monthly bill.
And I want to get the number down straight. From my memory, it was, I thought, $50,000. And I want to talk about that a
I'm seeing
little
We
bit.
Energies on page 22.
22. Well, irregardless, it's high, okay? So, I'm trying to wrap my head around what's going on here. And basically, the last couple board meetings I've been at, it's always been, we have financial problems. And I don't think there's anybody here that's going to argue that point at all. And we had referendums that failed, okay? So now the district is in a position where it needs to cut some cost, okay? I don't think there's going to get any argument there that we need to reduce some cost, okay? So I'm trying to wrap my head around what happened last week of adding that nurse on full-time. I just want to know how we would justify the $35,000 hole in the budget to add a nurse on full-time. How do we justify that? How do we justify expenses that, like that? I mean, is there any data? Are there kids lined up in the hallways waiting to see the nurse? I mean, it obviously was working for years where she was part-time. That $35,000, now do we pay her health insurance, her pension, and everything else? I mean, that's a big decision to make. We laid off some teachers. What do we get out of that? What does the district get out of that? I just want to know. Somebody tell me. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I think a number of us can chime in here, so it's a matter of who's going to start. Okay.
So in terms of what the district gets out of that, we have to provide medical services for students who need it. We have ever increasing numbers of students coming in with complex medical needs, more and more students being identified with really life-threatening conditions that need support on a daily basis, including diabetes and other conditions. So that drives the need for this. COVID continues to complicate that and add to those needs as a resource and support for all students, but really this has been driven by the need of the increasing complexity of the medical and health needs of our students.
You got data to support that?
I mean, I don't have
How
the
many-
numbers
does
with
The
me.
nurse see how many kids a day? Do they sign in? Does she see them? Do you have that information?
She does, but the nurse would also provide more than just that direct support because it's overseeing policies and practices to ensure the health and safety of all of our, 1,550 students here in the district. We have allergies that are life-threatening, lots of planning that needs to be in place, and students that come and receive medication and things like that on a daily basis.
are you have the information of how many students a nurse sees a day?
I could gather that data. I don't
I-
have it with me tonight.
I would like to know that, because what's she gonna be doing when she's not, taking care of a student? Is she gonna be answering the phone for the district? Or is she gonna be typing letters for the superintendent? What, I mean, what's she
Well,
gonna
and
be
she's
doing?
developing plans for students and consulting with physicians and working with community agencies to ensure that we're meeting student needs so that they remain safe at school.
I mean, that's a big decision. And when I watched the video last week, one person here lifted their head up and looked around and said, hey, at least we're not gonna shut the school down for a month, and that was that gentleman right there, okay? And nobody else asked these questions. Why? Why would you not? Why would I not give $35,000 to Andy to do some LED lighting to reduce my huge electric bill? Does that take precedence over that? We got 19 heat exchangers in the middle school that have cracks in them, that we have CO monitors on, that if we don't replace, we put the gas down into the students. We got roofs that are leaking, windows that are rotting off. I mean, it's gotta be pretty high on the list to take that $35,000 hole.
And we believe-
somebody's gotta ask some questions about it.
Well, I think one of the things, Dale, is that a nurse in a school setting is not doing exactly the same things that a nurse is doing in a medical setting. Certainly, there's some of the same things overlap, but again, so much of it is preventative. And the fact that, and these discussions have gone on for, really since I would say I felt like we were talking a lot about them since we started the reentry plan last year.
Yes.
Because this was critical to the whole discussion. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to prevention. And there's so much that goes into it. And being able to secure, part of it was just being able to secure a high-quality person for that position. And there's a very strong possibility we could have lost our current person had we not, we were sharing that position historically. And I think we all agree, given the way this year has gone and given the year, given what that individual in particular has done, losing her would have been a bigger loss. And again, nobody wanted to find an extra $35,000 to try and balance the budget. And yes, there are competing priorities, but at the end of the day, safety is the first one.
Well, yes, I'm gonna agree to that partly, but when we make a decision like that, when somebody says, hey, I wanna add $35,000 to the budget, present the data, put your argument out there, and prioritize it with what else is going on in the district, and make a decision based on information and data, not on what we'd like to see.
And that was
you know?
done.
Closed meetings, we did that for months.
So,
Yeah, that's what I was going to add. So we go through that process when we're identifying what those impact needs are and share that information about why that's the recommendation.
That was a process started in January, February timeframe to do the budget.
we had a temporary nurse that has been working out for years, I assume, right? A couple of years now.
Actually, we've had a temporary nurse for a few years, but we had a full-time nurse for, when I first arrived, there was a full-time nurse for 5 or 6 years, and then we reduced that based upon attrition. When that nurse retired, we replaced the nurse at a 0.6 due to the fact of addressing our structural budget deficit issues. And that was one way in which we did it, by saving on the health insurance costs and saving on the 0.4 additional salary. Through the years, then we've had 3 additional nurses since we've had it at part-time, which continue, and really it probably would have turned over even more, but one of the nurses, it worked ideally, that had applied for the job, the 0.6 worked ideally for her personal life at the time. Since then, I agree with Bob 100%. We had been sharing services, and I think it comes down to the factor of, were we nervous about losing this full-time nurse, which we feel has done an incredible job, to a full-time position in another district, knowing how difficult it's been to replace a 0.6 position. They're not readily an over surplus of nurses looking to fill a school position that way. And then finally, going back to what everyone said, the impact needs were shared at the last board meeting. It's not all done in closed. I mean, it's done in closed up to a certain point in time. And then at our last board meeting, we went through every single budget reduction and impact need, which Kate, she can pull together the information in regards to your question, Dale, in regards to what our current school nurse, how many kids she sees per week. But that won't be a problem pulling together. But she had already put together, I believe it was about 2.5 pages of other information on that impact need from a standpoint of our current status in our district and DPI's recommendations and comparables, so the board could see comparables to other districts in regards to that. But we can pull that together. I think one other important factor that's being forgotten that no one has mentioned yet, and that is for this year in our school year, for us to get on September 1st, we felt to have the operational model of in-person learning under the COVID pandemic, we had to have 4 additional health room aides, health aides given into every single school building on top of our current .6 school nurse and on top of our current health room assistant to our school nurse. So we had those 4 additional aides given to the health department so every school building could do close contact tracing. Or else, and the principals did a fantastic job and are doing a fantastic job on close contact tracing, but I'll let them speak for themselves. There's no way they could have done that and operated their buildings without the assistance of that health room aide this year. There's absolutely no way. And what's important to know is we don't have those 4 aides in our budget next year. Those 4 health room aides that we put into the budget this year are not into the budget next year. They're not in any of our line items. So we could go down 4 health room aides next year, and if we don't increase the school nurse, we would be maintaining a .6 school nurse, which under the current circumstances, I'm not quite sure how we would implement our operational model and do it successfully without that personnel.
I get that. I know that the COVID was a problem. COVID is kind of disappearing, going away. People are getting vaccinated. We're going into the summer season where kids are not going to be in school, okay? So the need, if there is a need, won't be till fall. You know what I'm saying? So we're adding one right now.
We're adding it for next school year. So the
Next school-
.6 does not increase this school year. The .6 to 1.0 does not impact this year's budget whatsoever. It's for the 2021-22 school year budget, which is July 1st.
Okay, so you still will have a different situation with the COVID and the mandates. Correct me if I'm wrong, come fall?
Possibly. We just don't know the full ramification of where things are going to be at in the fall. We have to make preparations for whatever may happen, which the nurse plays a key role in doing that.
I mean, it's a big decision, and somebody's got to have some data, and somebody's got to make their case and make their point.
And that was done before last
And I watched
meeting.
the video last
It was
week, and
before the
it was
meeting
like,
that
oh
was
my God,
discussed.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
No, I understand. It's tough to come in and see the end result of our budget dealings,
I mean,
which is what the last meeting was the end result of the budget. It was discussed for months before that to get to that point.
I mean, right now, I need to talk to Andy about some of the energy savings that can go on around here, and I think there's some. And I think some LED lights would make a huge difference to the energy bill that we're paying. And I don't even know if we have a return on investment study done on adding LED lights.
Andy,
Why don't
we've,
we just
not to go
talk
off
about
subject,
it,
but
or-
we've done quite a bit of LED lighting already. I know when your predecessor, Bob Ellis, was president, yourself. I mean, so the LED lighting on the maintenance projects per the referendum wasn't to begin LED lighting, it was to continue with the LED lighting that we've already been doing.
So yeah, I can show you that, Dale. I can bring it next meeting whenever you want to see it. I have the rest of the district surveyed. Every single light that's not LED's been surveyed, and it shows our ROI, return on investment, for the years, and that includes the focus on energy incentives. And it also shows life expectancy of the new equipment. So that was done. And also to speak to the electrical bill, we could show you data on those electrical costs, but I'm going to just be upfront with you that $50,000 getting adjusted. We Energy's changed their account coding on us, and there's a lot of errors that we're finding in those. So while we did not catch it right away, we caught it about a week later. I don't know what Cindy's job title, one of our administrative assistants that does a lot of the financial clerk type work. She's been exchanging a lot of emails and phone calls with our utility provider to get that adjusted. But otherwise, we do track all of our utilities. And then some of the stuff we talked about 2 board meetings ago about trying to do these energy saving items such as occupancy sensors, LED lighting, programming and scheduling, HVAC systems, all that stuff. We have a plan in place, and you know, our data shows, up until this year, our data shows that we are doing pretty good. I always look for ways to do better. This year's a little unprecedented because we have a little higher electrical costs involved because of COVID, where we're running some of our HVAC a little bit longer.
And actually, this bill looks to be a little under, right around 10,000, our total We Energies bill for 5 buildings.
It was up there. It was up there because one of the February ones was a big one.
Of course, with
So we're
gas.
always like a month behind.
Sure.
But that 50,000, they're gonna be owing us some credits.
I got a question for you. Are these fixtures here, when they put LED lights in them, do you have to change the whole fixture, I believe?
It depends upon what we want for the outcome. Now, I think that this is a great ceiling structure still. We have some, you know, it's just a nice ceiling. It's not like the old, you know, tiles. So no, you would not have to.
So
You could retrofit it, do a retro kit, which in this situation, that's exactly what I would do.
Okay, are you on 277 lighting?
No,
120?
yeah.
Okay.
Would it make sense, Dale, for you to meet with Andy at some point and go over some of these
I would
questions?
love to do
or-
a tour.
Yeah, we would probably meet, but I believe a cost reduction plan should be something like, should have these elements in it.
Sure.
One is turning the lights off. Thursday night, I drove around this little circle here, and every light in the classroom was on at 8 o'clock at night, and there was nobody there. One drove by the middle school. We had one teacher in one room, lights are on. 2 people in another room, lights are on. So needs to be free. Thursday.
So Thursday night we had parent-teacher conference.
Yes, I knew.
10 to 8 p.m. So teachers would have been in those classes.
And then the cleaning staff would be cleaning those areas.
I get that.
directly
I
after.
was expecting that, but if you had something like a infrared sensor in a room, as soon as the person walks in the room, they do their work, they leave the room, and the lights automatically go out. No
We have
inconvenience.
occupancy sensors.
We have the infra sensors.
They don't go off as soon as somebody walks out. They're set for 5, 10, 15 minutes. Depends upon how those rooms are getting used.
I mean, so we need.
And
some-
custodian staff is also trained that they can shut those off if they need to. Now, if they were cleaning another area of the building and they didn't get shut off, I don't know if you just caught them at the right time or.
Because I didn't
or
see
what.
anybody in the rooms. There was nobody in doing anything other than when I went to the middle school, there was one teacher, and then there was 2 people in the other room, and I saw there were several cars there. And I figured that something was going on that day, but when I,
Teacher conferences deal were virtual, so most likely the teacher was sitting at the desk and having a virtual parent-teacher conference. So it's probably just one person in each class, the teacher.
so we have to do, I'm just,
Wanted to sit in the dark?
no.
Oh, I thought that's what you were.
No, I said, well, could we put 2 in one room and turn the lights off in the other room? I'm just asking. You know, I'm just trying to get the mindset going here that, you know, lights off, like that gym there. All the lights are on in the gym, you know? But there's nobody in there. And I can see that. I'm not blaming you.
So I'm hearing you, Dale.
I'm
I'm
not
always,
bl-
I'm open-minded. I will always go back and investigate something. I think we might have came up with the.
I mean, I'm not
what happened.
criticizing you guys.
I think we
I'm
came
not-
up with what your assumption was, and I think she identified that. The gyms, I'm definitely gonna look into that, because you're absolutely right. We should be looking at these things. But I'm just saying,
I agree, Andy. We need to look. That's all I'm asking here is to look at these and put something together to be conscious of what we're doing. When we walk out of our rooms and our houses, we turn the lights off, right? Not unless you guys just leave got money to burn, leave the lights on, you know? So we do that. And maybe we don't need all the lights on the outside the buildings. Maybe we can do an inventory and shut some of the lights off there. And how about the signs running 24/7? 5 o'clock in the morning, when I go through here, go to the new elementary school, that sign's, the digital's on, it's blasted. There's not anybody around. It's just being conscientious will make a huge difference. If you put a group, maybe maybe somebody takes ownership and puts a group of people together and just say, hey, we have a goal of knocking 10% off of our bill, just 10%. And and those dollars start to add up, you know? I just don't think we're there yet on that type of thinking. You know, when we think about how your home, what you do in your home, think about your own money and your own electric bill. That's all I'm saying, is that we need to be conscientious of this.
No, I think everybody totally agrees with that, and
So
if you have any other ideas you want to work with Andy on, I think.
I would love
it'd
to
be
work
very
with Andy. You
much
know, we've got,
appreciated.
here's another thing. I know we're running into summer school, so, and I don't know, do we air condition all the buildings at the same time? Can we shut down one of the buildings and bring the students into, because we're using less classrooms, can we kind of make that move and shut down one of the buildings so we don't have to air condition them? I'm just asking, you know? I'm throwing these ideas out there.
Sure.
You know? Do we use the economizer? Do we bring in the cold air at nighttime to cool down the building and then don't turn the air on till 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Saves money.
Yep.
Okay? So we got all that. All that is available to us. And it's just a matter of being disciplined to do those things.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Do you have other questions about
No, and I could probably go a lot longer than I should, but I'm just bringing up the point that if we do something, we add a nurse, we need to make sure that it's justified, that somebody's got to throw the flag up and say, hey, why are we doing this? And if we see something that's not wrong, we need to say, hey, this is wrong, we got to change this and recognize it. Otherwise, we don't get better at all. You just don't get better. That's all. I mean, there's some other things I'd like to talk about, but I could go all night, and not only on energy, but some of the assets that we have.
Is there any other?
I'll do-
It's just like you would like to see the data presented, you know, that's an offline exercise, and it sounds like you have a whole list of offline exercises.
It is offline, yes, yes.
Because we have questions and not answers tonight, so,
Yep.
just
So-
to make sure that we can accomplish what we want
Right.
Yep.
tonight.
So I'm just going to leave it there, and maybe we'll get.
One of the things I just would like to bring up, and not to keep the conversation going, and that is this, and that is, we do this oftentimes with new board members, so we've already discussed this. We just haven't arranged it yet, and that would be to ask Anna and Dale, we'll find our date, and Andy, myself, and whomever else, each building level administrator will be available when we give a tour of the building. So we'll give a tour of each building, take you through each building, answer any questions you have, and then it gives an opportunity to ask some additional questions of the principals, of Andy, and we do the inside and outside of the facilities. So,
I have just one more thing I would like to ask. What would be wrong, and it's free, get a fair market value of the Dobeck School? Find out what that thing is worth so that we know what we have on our hands and what we may be able to do in the future.
Yes, that has been discussed many times in the past. It's a building that we don't use a lot of, but we do use a good half of the building right now. So we would have to find place to move that half to, which is gonna take a chunk of money.
I get
Plus,
that.
we've been trying to sell that land for 3 years now. We still don't have an acceptable offer, so. to
Right, but
try
you're
to sell
selling the land, if you
building-
sell the land in the building, and if you know what, the prices have gone up, and maybe, just maybe, if you had a dollar figure of what that whole combination would be, then you know what your budget would be, and you can make some decisions based on money that you feel that would come in. Fair market value, something where the building or land would sell for within a reasonable amount of time. You don't move out as soon as you put it on the market. You just stay there, and then if you do sell it, you still stay in it until you get your secondary plan in place. You just lease it back from the new owner.
But I guess the biggest problem is, for the amount of space that the administration would need, you're looking at a $2 to $3 million project to build that, and we don't have the money to build that. And we're not gonna get that much for selling that building.
I'm not sure whether I would agree with all that, but, you know, I'd have to take a look. I mean, they are in classrooms right now, and maybe we can take a tour, and maybe we can find some space. There's a couple ideas that we could possibly do, you know? So, just want a fair market value. If it's $2 million for that building, well, then that's what you got to work with.
Cut that in half and you might be probably high.
So, that was one other subject.
Sure. Is there any other questions on the financial report for this month?
Just one quick question. Knowing that we had some unexpected expense in the lunch program, at this point overall, how are you feeling about lunch revenues versus expenses and where we're projected to end up for the year?
Yes. Prior to the spring break kitchen walk-in cooler issue, we were looking at breaking even, basically. One caveat is what we end up doing with the ESSER funding, because the ESSER funding could replace some of the lost revenues in food service from especially last year that still carried over. So, Andy, did you get a quote yet on the cooler, how much it's gonna be?
So there's a couple underlying costs right now. So there's also the dishwasher heater that they had to do a repair on.
Okay.
And then, sorry, thank you. So that they had to do a major repair on the dishwasher here with the gearbox, and then we also know at Prairie View, they had to replace the condenser and evaporator.
Yep.
I'm thinking we're gonna fall around 20,000 between both of those.
Okay, so if we were looking at breaking even, possibly -20 at this point.
Any other questions on the financial report?
No, I won't drag on all night.
All right. All in favor of approval of the financial report, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right, discussion action items. First one is staffing retirements.
I don't believe we have any at this time, am I correct? Looking at the principals and Kate and everybody? Okay.
All right. Next item, approval of donations.
Kath, would you like to go through those, since there's multiple I've noticed on those? And they're submitted into you?
So, on page 42, this organization did a donation also last year to our food service program, Key Benefit Concepts. So they donated $1,000 to be used towards the food service program. They appreciate the efforts of, again, the food service and providing all the meals to the kids in especially these trying times. The second donation on page 43, the venue did a donation of $310. Then on page 44 starts a series of donations, I'll say, I think prompted by Tony Barrett when he, at the last board meeting, donated what his taxes would have gone up by. And again, Mr. Adam Witkowitz did the same, Miss Jessica Fuchs, and Mr. and Mrs. Ted Zess. So we have 4 donations then that represent those donations. And lastly, on page 48, Retker's Company / Exxon. I send 2 thank you letters, but it's 1 donation, $500 for Prairie View Math and Science.
I will make the motion to approve the donations as presented with the appreciation and thanks of the district.
Do you mind if I list the donations in the minutes?
No, please do.
Okay.
I think you ought to put them on the signs out front of the school thanking each individual. So,
That's a good idea. We do Facebook, so I'll leave it to the people who do the signs. If they can fit something on there, that would be great.
so I think it's a good idea, the donations, and not sure whether we have a real good vehicle to get that money in. If I wanted to donate, maybe we have a relationship with the Citizens Bank.
We have a website, and on the website, you can make the donation
But
directly.
what do you do physically to make a donation? If you want to
Mhm, so you
donate
can-
20, 30, $100,
You can write a
where do you go?
Sure, you can write a check, drop it off anywhere to the East Troy Community School District, any office,
So
or
why don't we
again,
make it a little more convenient, have them drop it off at a bank, open up a checking account at a savings account at the bank. When they go to the bank, they can run through the teller, they can go up, they can even be a little, what I'm getting at is that we can kind of use this to help fundraise, to bring some money in. And then, once we start to get some donations, so maybe we can go to like Quick Trip or LD's or wherever, and have them do some donations and put that up on the marquee to say, hey, you're supporting the school, we're advertising you're supporting the school. Kind of build on this thing a little bit. Just don't let it die on the vine, but build it up a little bit and use it to our advantage. Create the vehicle, make the donations easy, recognize the donations, track the donations, and you might be surprised how much money you get. I know the Catholic Church, I've said this many times, they needed $80,000 for their windows.
Yep.
They didn't have the money. They fundraised it, and you wouldn't believe within 3-4 months they had raised $80,000 to repair their windows.
yeah, so the first thing we're gonna have to do, and I can bring it to the next board meeting if the full board chooses this, is our donation policy right now says fundraising is discouraged. That basically we should be providing curriculum and education without encouraging fundraising. So, I mean, we'd have to change sentence number 1 if, again, we're going to encourage fundraising. Would, again, the board like the policy at the next board meeting to begin the process of changing that?
I mean, that's what the Catholic Church does. They fundraise. They're always fundraising, you know? And it's
Maybe if all the board members want to look at that policy, it's online, all the policies are, and maybe suggest any updates to it that might make sense for the board, and we can look at it at a future board meeting.
Kathy, could I lean on you to maybe send out an email just to point us in the right direction as to where we can find that policy?
Should I bring it to the next board meeting or not then? Should we have it on the next agenda or
Let's
not?
bring it up as a policy review.
Okay,
You can take a look at it.
okay, so I'll have it on the next board meeting policy, okay.
Thank you.
I'll second your motion,
All right,
Bob.
thanks, Anna. All right, discussion on the donations as presented. Or Kathy, you wanted to go with it? We don't need the amounts.
I was
You
making a
said you
note.
wanted to add something on the donations earlier?
You wanted to specify that? You wanted to make
Oh, is that okay? It just gives, again, more credence to the people making the donations, I believe.
I hereby make the motion that we accept the donation for $1,000 from Lindemont and Key Benefit Concepts, that we accept the donation of $310 from the venue, that we accept the donation of $250 from Mr. and Mrs. Anthony Barrett, that we accept the donation of $500 from Adam Witkowitz, that we accept the donation of $300 from Mrs. Jessica Fuchs, that we accept the donation of $1,426 from Mr. and Mrs. Ted Zess, and that we accept the donation of $500 for the Prairie View Math and Science-related rewards and positive behavioral intervention system from Rutgers Company and ExxonMobil.
Anna, you're okay with the second still?
I'll second that motion.
All right. Discussion.
Just want to make sure that we do recognize those people that donate and see if we can get it up on the displays.
All right. All in favor of approval, say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And just as an add-on, I would encourage everybody out there to, if you voted yes, or even if you voted no for the referendum, and if you'd like to help out the school district, make a donation of what your taxes would have gone up anyways. It's a voluntary effort, and if we can balance our budget or help balance a budget with some of that money, that'd be wonderful. Next item, consideration of changing the May board meeting date.
Yeah, this could be either a special meeting if the board elects to do a special meeting, or we could just possibly change the May 17th regular board meeting to the 10th of May if you elect. The rationale and reason it actually has to occur due to the fact we issued preliminary non-renewals after the budget was approved at the April 19th special meeting. So the necessary staff received preliminary non-renewal notices, and now final non-renewals also must be issued from the preliminary non-renewals to complete the Wisconsin statutes, a requirement under the preliminary and final non-renewals. So one of the things is people might say, well, why can't we just wait till the 17th of May? Due to the fact final non-renewals have to be voted on and approved prior to May 15th. And it has to be 15 days after the issuance of the given preliminary non-renewal to the employee. So we have to time it out from the issuance of when we not when we made a motion of approval, but when they actually were issued to the employee. And we have to wait the necessary 15 days and then make sure that we do it prior to the 15th of May and provide the necessary rights of the due process hearing that they might have wished to ask for 5 days after receipt. So we will have accomplished all those things if we have our special meeting sometime the 10th or thereafter, but prior to the 15th. My recommendation would be, if it works for everybody, just to take the regular board meeting on the 17th and move it to May 10th.
I'm okay with that. How's everybody else's calendars look?
It's fine. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I may be a little late because I have a conflict that afternoon, but I will be here as quickly as I can.
Okay.
Is that May 10th?
Yeah. All right, I'll make a motion to change the May meeting date to May 10th. Okay, discussion? All right, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, student representative report. Sarah's not here tonight, so we'll table that one for next month. Next item, discussion and action, if appropriate, pertaining unpaid obligations and authorization for collection agency to pursue small claims litigation.
So we have two policies where the last step for uncollected fees, both in food service fees and in student fees, for example, registration fees. The last step is if families don't pay, then they're sent to collections. The collections company is not an end-all be-all. They have trouble too. Sometimes they address the families and they don't get a response. So the collections company has called me and they have asked if they can proceed with a higher level of collections, which would be basically starting with an attorney and doing small claims litigation when they, again, are not able to collect based upon their normal letters. And again, I thought that was a more drastic step. I didn't want any board members to, hear from the community that people were being taken to small claims court and have you not be aware of that. So I decided I should come and ask instead if you want, again, it going to that level.
How much money we're talking?
So currently, there's different thresholds of how much the collection agency collects when they're able to recoup. We try to keep it at 1/3 of the amount, which means it's a higher amount. There's different thresholds. Some are 50% the collections agency keeps. Again, we try to only put our highest owing families in, which I think is over $500. Not remembering that number off the top of my head, but I think it's over 500. And again, then that makes the collection agency only collect 1/3. They did say if they proceed with the small claims litigation, if they proceed with this next step, then it would go to 50% because they have to engage an attorney. They send letters. They may have to go through garnishment wages. Again, could be court dates. I asked, if I would be subject to go to the courts, sure. They may need me present at the small claims court, explaining the statements and what the family owes if we go that route again.
How much money is owed to the district?
I don't have that number, Dale, off the top of my head. We went to these policies and we went to a collections agency because it was getting significant. We had a lot of people not paying, so I'll say that.
Is it 10,000, 20,
It was
30?
over 10,000 when we decided to go to collections initially, but that was a year ago, 2 years ago.
Are they people even around anymore, or they've left the area, or don't know, or?
Both.
Kathy, can you explain what happened before we would have decided? What are our first steps to try to
Sure.
make sure people are paying their fees? You know,
Sure.
what happens at the school level before?
Sure. So, we have a couple policies. We are not allowed legally to withhold report cards and records. So,
Can you state that policy number too, so
Sure.
everyone can look it up at a later time?
yep, this one I have on me. 470 is our student fees, fines, and charges policy. And the page I'm specifically referring to is fee collection procedures. So report cards and records will not be withheld because of unpaid obligations, but notices to the parents will be sent following the first and second quarters, which we do. And then number 2 says fees for athletic extracurricular activities must be paid at the time of the start of the respective activity, or it may result in non-eligibility for participation. And I know that our secretaries in our athletic department does that. They have to pay to play. Unpaid obligations will result in loss of privileges, this is item number 3, for end-of-year activities, including high school graduation ceremonies, middle school end-of-year field trips, or other activities unrelated to curricular requirements. And then item 4, unpaid obligations may be sent to a collection agency. So those are the steps on basic, like, again, registration fees, class fees, et cetera. Food service is a different policy. It's policy 761, food service. It starts here, item 1, timely payments must be made to avoid delinquent accounts. We encourage completion of free and reduced meal applications for any family that may qualify for assistance. Courtesy and negative balance notifications will be sent to all families. Low balance phone calls will be made to families with $5 or less in their account. Negative balance phone calls are made nightly to families with a negative balance. Students will be offered an alternative meal if the family account has a negative balance of 20 or more. This alternative meal will be charged to the family account and an annual price determined by the food service operations. Item 5, if a child has money the day of a meal to purchase a reduced price or paid meal at the time of the meal service, the child will be provided such meal. A la carte items, so items other than a lunch like a bagel on the side, may not be charged until a positive balance is reached in the overall food service account. In-hand payment for items will be accepted. And then here's where we get into the collections again. Number 7, should negative balances continue to increase upon alternative meal use, any of the following may occur at the discretion of the principal and/or food service director. A, alternative lunches may be discontinued. Notice to the family would occur. However, any student still attempting to enter the line may be removed by the principal. B, delinquent accounts may be sent to a collection agency. C, a different alternative meal may be provided at no cost. D, any economic assistance accounts temporarily available to relieve debt or to fund a lunch account may be utilized. And that's the end of those policies.
Is there any exposure to the district on the attorney's clause if things are not collected? What's the exposure for the district?
For the collections agency pursuing?
Yes.
None that I'm aware of.
Even if they go the attorney route, is there any exposure?
No, that's the collection agency's attorney. You know, if a family sues us back, I don't know if that would be an
Okay.
issue.
You just need authorization tonight to continue with collection agency.
Basically, I want to know if you are comfortable with allowing the collection agency to go another step further. They say it's called small claims litigation. So families who, even when the collection agency is contacting them, don't pay, it's their next step. They hire an attorney, they take the family again to small claims court, and like one way that they end up collecting that way is through wage garnishment, which they don't do unless they go this path.
And we're only asking them to pursue debt of a certain amount and greater? Was it $500 and or more?
Correct. That's the ones that I normally send to them. And the difference again would be that they normally, if they're able to collect, they retain 1/3 because it's gone through them. But if we want the small claims, because again, it's more fees on their end, it would be, they would retain 50% of the fees.
I don't think we have to feel good about it necessarily, because this isn't one of those conversations that any of us look forward to having. However, I mean, the reality is that on behalf of taxpayers, we do have to do everything we reasonably can to be fiscally responsible. And I guess the other concern is if we go back to the credit collections agency now and try and put a leash on them and tell them they can't, we may find that other agencies don't want to work with us in the future, and I don't think we can put ourselves in that position.
I guess I'm just wondering if $500 is too low. You know, not knowing the list of amounts or, you know, who we're talking about. Just in terms of what's worth pursuing and what's not. And then also, I am curious, and I will further read the policy, to just reconsider intervention steps earlier. I'm not saying they're wrong, but, you know, do we understand the situations of things and how did we intervene sooner? I'd be curious to
Yep,
just
and
look
I'll be
into.
honest with that, Anna. It is tough to intervene sooner because you intervene at points where it gets negative, right? And I think the people in school districts, right, your employees, want to only see the good for kids. So, you know, for example, taking away a 5th grade fishing trip is not an ideal solution for anybody in the school district. But like we've had conversations over and over, years and years, then it doesn't snowball into the middle school. And then if you take away the middle school, 8th grade graduation trip, then it doesn't snowball into the high school by, you know, so like intervening early, stopping it in those sooner grades. But it's, honestly, it is a very heartbreaking thing for all of our staff to have to deal with all the time. So.
I imagine it is, yeah.
Mhm.
You know, I'm the new guy on the row here, so I don't know if 500 is the right threshold, if that even makes sense to spend time and dollars and energy on. I would leave that to your thinking,
Okay.
Kathy, but that's the one point that I wanted to make.
I don't know if it is. That's just been Kathy.
Kath, is the 500 designated directly in the policy?
No, no, not at all. It's just, again, there's limited amounts of,
Yep, no, I get it. It's more about what stipulations and contingencies that are continuing to be attempted, done, interventions prior to reaching it, rather than.
right, right. And 500 is the amount that the collection agency's fees change at. So again, I'd rather, like you say, intervene on our end if we're trying to collect $200. And remember, then they will keep 50% of it if we send them to collections. So again, we're not sending them to collections at that early stage.
I'll make a motion to authorize working with the collection agency to collect this money whatever means they can.
I'll second it. Sorry, I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, policy 110, educational philosophy.
Yeah, this is the third reading, hence why it's a discussion action item. Amy's unable to attend tonight. She did not make any changes since the last board meeting, except from the time, I think, of the first readings, there was a couple suggestions. So pretty much all the content, well, not pretty much, the content itself has remained intact. On educational philosophy, it had also gone through the student learning subcommittee, and then obviously to the board levels for first and second reading. So there's been numerous viewings of it. The biggest thing of the whole educational philosophy is to update it from a verbiage standpoint to align it to our focus on personalization, our 6 Cs within our district, and making sure that the language reiterates and supports our learner empowerment initiatives that we're trying to do, with some other verbiage of, you'll notice accurate assessments are in there. So those were the major changes in the educational philosophy from the original beginning part of it. The early graduation policy is primarily aligning it to with the first and second trimesters, and changing it to all the trimester works primarily. And the technical excellence scholarship program was added to the academic excellence higher education scholarship. And that pretty much is state criteria that was provided there. So it wasn't even necessarily East Troy. It's us putting down the state's criteria and making sure we follow it directly as described by the state.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to approve policy 110. Okay, any discussion on that first one, policy 110? All right, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Policy 110 is approved. The next one, policy 345.71. Chris kind of described it already. We just need,
I'll make a motion to approve policy 345.71 for early graduation.
Second.
okay, discussion. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then policy 461.
I will make a motion to approve policy 461, the academic excellence higher education scholarship program.
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion. All right. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, update related to ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 funds.
Yeah, so actually I and Jay will be going kind of hand in hand a little bit, possibly even a little to Kay, I guess. And that is everyone understanding exactly what are the dollar figures associated to the 3 different levels of ESSER, and understanding the timelines associated to decisions being made, and then us attempting to help everybody understand just the various needs. I think obviously everyone understands we have various operational needs, we have various maintenance needs, but for everybody to kind of have an idea of how this is progressing. And unfortunately, a little bit of it is, we always talk about, or I at least talk about, the importance of stability. And there's stability, and at least in regards to some dollar figures, but there's obviously a little bit lack of instability from a standpoint of when some of them will become readily available and used, and yet we're trying to balance it with some pretty pressing needs. So that's the balancing act, right? Not being able to address those needs until we have the funds available, and more importantly, ensuring through our acknowledgement of the grants that we actually can utilize those dollars in the appropriate way. We're assuming, but we aren't necessarily 100% sure until we're given the okay when we provide the submittal for acceptance. But with that being said, let me just point out again, First of all, I want to reiterate, I've had some people reach out to me in regards to this question, and I always go back to asking them to, our FAQs are up and they're going to stay up. We're not removing our frequently asked questions per our referendum questions, because I think it really helped people to understand a lot about our district. And we're going to keep adding to them. We don't look at it any longer as their FAQs associated to a referendum. We look at it more that their FAQs associated to helping to understand our district. So we're going to keep updating frequently asked questions that we think are just imperative for our community to understand about our district and our operations, period. Not even necessarily tied to referendum questions. And secondly, I encourage people to go back and view board meetings. Unfortunately, I'm going to be blunt, right? The people who want to view them, and the people who don't necessarily. But I'm encouraging people to view certain points of board meetings. March 15th, our board meeting from the 1758 mark until the 30.11 mark discussed ESSER funds. And we discussed it in pretty great detail at the time. Now, things have changed since then, so hopefully I can provide more insight tonight. But again, I want to go back to when people are asking me, when are we going to learn about ESSER funds? I go, we have been discussing ESSER funds, and we've been sharing information about it. So I just want people to try and make sure that they're staying abreast of the way we're trying to keep you abreast. There is ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. If people are wondering, first of all, what is the acronym for ESSER? Let's add another acronym to education. I always love that, not that we don't have enough. But elementary and secondary school emergency relief. Elementary and secondary school emergency relief. Now, originally in ESSER 1, just to recap, right, we had been provided $225,000 that were available from ESSER 1. But we still had an additional, after that $225,000 was already used by our district and primarily used towards the bipolar ionization system to help with our HVAC and the indoor air quality towards getting back to in-person for this September, we still had an additional $460,000 of additional expenses related to COVID-19. And we still have that additional $460,000. It has not been addressed yet, all right? It is there. So with the $460,000, again, I won't go into every single component of it, but some of the primary ones obviously were a lot of the components that Andy put in place that were in addition to obviously the bipolar ionization, which is the continual daily, weekly, monthly spraying, right? The barricades, additional things that we had to do there. And then it was primarily personnel was a big part of it, right? We talked about our 4 health room aides that we put in place this year to assist with all the necessary contact tracing, to assist with all the illness, right? And then we also had our 4.5, at one time it was 4, then the board approved of 2 additional ones, but we went up to 4.5 full-time floating subs that were absolutely needed. And I will tell you, we would have not gotten through this year without those additional floating subs. They have been utilized every single day. Every day. And a lot due to the fact of a large portion of staff being out at one time or another related to COVID, and indirectly or directly. So those were essential. Now, again, those are not in our budget for next year. Not even in Andy's budget necessarily for all the additional other expenses. So we're going to have to address some of that. Like, are we going to put $460,000-ish into the future budget for some of those projects, for the personnel and some of the equipment? Things that have to still yet to be decided. ESSER 2 funding. We now know that ESSER 2 funding will provide $750,000. So ESSER 2 will provide $750,000. Now, I guess you could look at it this way. The board will have to decide. So will the board possibly say, we're going to take off the $750,000 in ESSER 2, we want to pay that additional $460,000 in expenses from this school year out of that $750,000. That could be a possibility of doing that instead of electing to go to a fund balance or a positive variance or anything else that might come to fruition. You could elect to say, we just want to take care of that $460,000 and pay right out of it the $750,000 of ESSER 2. You could elect to do that, so basically you would have about 290-ish, right? 290,000 of ESSER 2 funds left, still to be utilized. That's a possibility. Now, ESSER 2 funds do not have to be spent until September of 2023. Until 2023. I'm gonna be honest, the sad news is, the ESSER 3 funds is September 2024, and I'm gonna tell you what, we're not gonna have an issue spending these quickly. And I mean that. I mean, your biggest decisions will be where it goes towards in the prioritization, not spending it. We have enough needs, and I mean that. We'll be able to go through them. And I think people already know we have a lot of those needs. Now, the question is, will all those needs be in line to where we can spend and utilize the dollars that are designated within ESSER? So at this time, I already kind of went through it, that, we had 4.5 full-time floating substitutes. We had 5 I apologize, I keep saying 4. We had 5 part-time health room aides, and we had all those additional costs of mitigation measures, the antimicrobial sprays that Andy had and so on in the barricades. And I've already said that those are not within our 21-22 budget, that we already had to do our preliminary balancing reductions that involved, as we know, all too unfortunate, 6.48 FTEs for next year, which affected 14 staff indirectly in different ways. It affected all of us indirectly. With that being said, so ESSER 3 funds, which is also known, because I've heard people utilizing these back and forth, and they're like, talk to me about the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA, as I call it, ARPA. The ARPA is ESSER 3, okay? So ARPA is what gave us the ESSER 3 funds for the schools, all right, for K-12 schools. The Department of Public Instruction is estimating about $1.4 billion for Wisconsin. Now, that might seem overwhelming to people. Like, my gosh, $1.4 billion to the state of Wisconsin for ARPA, and that'll go into ESSER 3. Understand, and with that being said, right now, our district is we're estimating that 1.5 million, we believe, will be at least received by our district for ESSER 3, because they're talking about double the amount of ESSER 2. Well, ESSER 2 is 750, we know that. So we believe that, and then if they're talking that way, we believe we will at least be receiving, we hope for an estimate of 1.5 million for ESSER 3 funds. So if we elected to take care of the 460,000 of additional expenses this year, we would have basically what we're estimating to believe 1.5 million-ish in ESSER 3, and then you would have 290,000 still left in ESSER 2. All right? And obviously a little difference there, right? Because the 290 you have to spend before 2023 of September. The 1.5 is, again, 2024 of September. One of the key things out of the ESSER 3, which is the 1.5 million, is 20% has to be utilized towards learning loss. So already 20% has to be designated towards learning loss. So 300,000, right? So 300,000 has to be designated towards learning loss. So we really only have 1.2 million, if that's what we end up getting in ESSER 3, to designate it towards other projects as the board deems fit. 300,000 has to go to learning loss. Now, if you were to ask me, define learning loss, Chris, right? I see Ted smiling. That is still yet to be defined by us and by DPI working with us. So what data we will use, which data we're going to use, right? To be honest, I don't want it to be all about standardized testing data. I think there's other things that we view as learning loss in our district besides just learning loss on a standardized testing representation, right? There's learning loss of opportunities. So the question will be, what data are we going to use on the social emotional side and on the academia side for us to determine that? And then designating 20% to that, whether those are supportive measures, intervention measures, what will that be to assist kids? So that's still going to be worked out, but I believe we'll be looking at assessment data, and I believe we'll be looking at perceptions data. We'll be looking at both to help to determine where that learning loss is and how to apply and assist correctly. With that being said, I sent out a while ago, but I just want to go through it. Some of the things to give people an idea of what ESSER 3 funds then can be utilized towards. Very similar to what ESSER 2 can be utilized for. So you can kind of, I think both of these will work towards either of these, but these are all the bullet points. Any activity authorized under the ESEA, any activity authorized by IDEA, any activity authorized by the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, authorized by, any activity authorized by Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act. I'll rip that off a minute. Coordination of preparedness and response efforts of local education agencies with state, local, tribal, and territorial public health departments. Activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth, including how to outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of each population. Developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the preparedness and response efforts of local education agencies. Training and professional development for staff of the local education agency on sanitation and minimizing the spread of the infectious disease. Purchasing supplies to sanitize and clean the facilities. Planning for, coordinating and implementing activities during long-term closures. Purchasing educational technology. Providing mental health services and supports. Planning and implementing activities related to summer learning and supplemental after-school programs. Addressing learning loss among students. Addressing school facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce risk of virus transmission and exposure. So again, I think a lot of people see and they hear these dollars of ESSER and they're like, well, boy, you got a long list already from your referendum maintenance that didn't pass, so utilize it towards all that. We won't be able to, utilize all these dollars just towards that. One, we don't have $8 million in ESSER, right? I just said we have 1.5 and 290 if we elect to pay off the 460. So we don't even have close to our 8 million. Two, not all these dollars can go to all those projects. Not all those projects on our capital maintenance projects per the referendum align to these bullet points. Some do, right? If it's an HVAC, we think it will align, but again, we won't know until we apply. So this board could elect to direct where those monies are gonna go, which will direct us to saying, great, we'll apply for it. We may come back to you saying it was not accepted. It wasn't accepted, so we'll have to look at that. Inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve any indoor air quality of your school facilities. Developing strategies and implementing public health protocols for reopening and continuing to stay reopened for operations. And other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of your services. So I say all that, and I've shared that before with the board, but I say it because, yes, it's broad, but it's not as broad as you think. I mean, it is still narrow to the pandemic to a degree. So we will know more when we apply after we think we've identified where we want the funds to go. The reason I say I'm bringing all this up is this is tied to our next line item in our agenda, which is the unfortunate place of the current units at our middle school. And Andy's gonna go through PSI some additional options, right? And what those options will cost and what's doable, ideal, and what can we afford, right? And making sure we address the problem still, so that we have everything the way it needs to be and suited. But with that being said, I think you're gonna hear numbers that will demonstrate, wow, Chris, depending upon what we elect, we just utilize the ESSER funds. Yep, and that's if it gets approved, if we put it to that line item, right? We gotta find out if it were to get approved. But right, we would have just utilized it. And truly, I think based upon what I'm hearing for numbers, not only utilized it, we still will need to find funding. Because don't forget, it's not 1.5, it's 1.2 because we have to have 300,000 to the learning loss. And I will say, as a district administrator, I wish there was more to student learning. I'm not necessarily saying learning loss, to student learning, right? I mean, I think one of the big things is to not only provide a safe environment for kids physically, but I would love to see more monies that we could provide that we said things were about not only physiological, but we said psychological, right? And I think this past year, we could provide a lot of funding to kids to help on that side of it. And again, none of these dollars are necessarily going to any type of personnel that we know of at this time for next year, right? So now, one final thing that I don't try to go another step is I can't share because I don't know yet. I wish I could. And that is, if you were to ask me, Chris, what about that operational model for next year? Where are we at? I mean, that's kind of an important decision maker in regards to utilization of funds. That will not, we're in the process of having the groups working on that. There's gonna be a survey that'll be done for staff. We're gonna share that survey with the board so you guys can provide feedback on that even before we have discussions. And that'll allow us to have some sort of focus on our operational model for next year of certain things that we think we need to get back as feedback from different varying, all staff members and from the board. The idea is, just so you're aware, is that recommendations via the 3 different subcommittees that we had last year are all gonna be kind of gathering information and working together, that they will come back on the week of the 24th of May with recommendations to me of options for what our operational model should look like next year. That will give them ample time to develop the survey, get the information back from the survey, and utilize the survey in those recommendations. My goal then is to come to the board on the 7th of June during our regular scheduled board meeting with preliminary options for all of you to begin having discussions on. And maybe we can decide that night so it doesn't stay very preliminary, because I think parents would like to know sooner rather than later on what the operational model is going to look like for next year. Not only is there in person, not only will there be virtual opportunities offered, but what's the reentry handbook look like? Has anything changed from it, right? I think parents want to know. And obviously that's very fluid. I mean, people have to understand that we're going to be discussing it all summer, but I think we need to try to provide our best, proponent to them and give them the best recommendation at the time. So that's kind of the timeline, so you know that. So I'm just trying to provide that to you so you know if you're trying to utilize where these funds will be. I think we have to be a little cautious to designate them out too quickly when those subcommittees haven't come back yet with recommendations. Because they may come back, and if you already designate out all those dollars to, let's say, maintenance, that we think aligns to the needs of ESSER, what happens if those subcommittees come back and they're offering a lot of personnel that they think still needs to be in place for next year? I'm gonna have to look at them right away and go, you guys, we don't even have any dollars for it anymore. We utilized all the ESSER funds. Then it would, I'm not saying we couldn't share those options still with you, but then it would be more of a discussion, where's the money's coming from? Fund balance, where? Which I'm not a huge fan of doing fund balance and cliff items. Cliff, I would prefer to stay away from fund balance, period, due to the fact it's not a savings account, like people think often. It's not a savings account. But that's kind of all of that. So I think one final thing, and I don't mean to throw another wrench into it, but there's also discussion at the state level, and I'll say it, I hope it's not true. I hope it's not true, and that is that there's been, it sounds like possible discussions as if people may be viewing this additional large federal stimulus dollars that's going to be provided to the state of Wisconsin and throughout other states, obviously, but that maybe that could help offset not having to be addressing any type of revenue increases at the state level in the budget. Well, I think I'm going to say, I think that'd be a huge, huge devastating effect on schools, and I don't think it's being viewed correctly if that were to be done, due to the fact these are one-time funds. They're one time, but yet that impact would have everlasting effects on our revenue. You know how we talk about that compounding effect since the revenue limits came in on our district? Well, this would be another compounding effect forever, because we would have not gotten it at the state level. And even though the state might say, well, we'll readdress that in 2023. Yeah, but it's always going to be a compounding effect thereafter. So that would be a huge, huge mistake, in all honesty. I hope it does not result that way, that it's being utilized as, well, we've got these additional dollars that can help us with offsetting a state budget for a while and at the K-12 level. I think that would be a huge mistake. And the second thing is, I think people need to remember, look at what I just described from our expenses of COVID and what we're trying to deal with. We have more expenses than even the funding provides. So I'm sure other districts have to upgrade HVACs and other issues too. I mean, I'm sure they have other personnel issues that are related to COVID, maybe not even always related to COVID. So look at the structural deficit we just tried to balance for next year. Nothing related to COVID. And yet, if COVID dollars get used to help offset state funding at K-12 levels, it's going to impact our budget even more next year than what we just addressed. So I really, it's something that I want to let you know that I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I'm also trying to compose a letter. I know Kathy and I talked today. I know she's working on one from maybe a business manager's point of view, but we think we need to address it with a letter to our state legislators and to Governor Evers, and just letting them know again, like, we're speaking to let you know of the impact here. And speaking like we did last September, if you recall, and the board approved of that letter. I'll try to compose one. I'd like to have the board approve of it and sign it if you're in favor of it. If you're not, I understand. But it would be, it's neutral from a standpoint of political party, but it's attempting to address the facts of the impact to our district. And making people well-versed and aware, if you elect to do this, what it could mean to us. So I just want you to know that, due to the fact I get a little nervous that people are looking at it as additional dollars that are not really needed by districts, and boy, are they needed. In your board packet, Kathy began putting together an ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 kind of timeline to it, right? That has the date, the deadline, our current allocations, what went to the private schools, if anything needs to go to the private schools in ESSER 2 or ESSER 3, which is not, the final totals. And then, obviously, in ESSER 3, we gave a long list, or ESSER 1, we gave a long list of where those monies were utilized. Now we're working again, right? You guys will be working to help us determine and approving of where those monies will get utilized in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. And what we wanted to let all of you know is all of this we will share publicly then with the community. So this will be on our webpage. We'll put it under probably around the FAQs. We'll also put it in our operational section. But we want people to know publicly the transparency of what it is, how it's being used, and where it's going. So we can take away any misconceptions or misguidance of what people are thinking. And then, I'm sorry for going on, but I really think that's the primary thing. So if you guys have specific questions on that, please let me know, and I think you'll know why I wanted to have that discussion prior to Andy going on the update of the middle school HVAC. Because I think it'd be really easy to hear him and then say, well, we got all those ESSER funds, thank goodness. Yeah, it is good that we have them, but we have a lot of areas of need. We've got to really work on prioritizing those areas of need.
Can I ask a question now? Can I ask a question now?
Sure.
Is that okay? When can we start applying for the ESSER 2 funds? And if you apply for a project and it's approved, are you committed to it?
Kath?
Now, you can apply and receive approval and change your mind before basically the purchase order is written for it. So, I mean, if again we approve a HVAC repair and it's $500,000, so we'll submit, say, this is what we're gonna do. They'll ask a lot of questions back. It's a back and forth, and then they'll finally give us an approval. And again, you can change your minds up until the point where we issue a purchase order for the work to be done. Then the company who's doing the work is already pursuing it and would have again, a couple days in after the purchase order. Hopefully, we could still pull it back, but basically, at
And
that
obviously,
point,
we
you won't
change the
change your
direction,
mind.
we need to reapply again.
Yes.
I mean, the reason for my question is just, again, I'm learning, but budgeting is seeming to be a game of make a plan and then learn a bunch of new stuff and have new needs come up and then need to change the plan. So
It's
if you
always
apply.
fluid.
Yeah, so
It's
if you
always
apply for
fluid.
something and another need that really is more urgent or more critical or more timely were to come up, and I don't know that even the time lapse of applying back and forth with questions and finally getting approval, but I'm just
Yep.
wondering how locked in you are. That's why
Yep.
I'm asking the question.
Yep.
It's a really good question. Yeah. And I think the other difficult part about it is it's in regards to just our yearly budgeting too, right? I mean, Andy will kind of demonstrate that a little bit tonight, and that is, I don't know if this, yeah. When, obviously if direction is provided, it doesn't have to be tonight by any means, but when direction is provided of the usage of ESSER, and if it's utilized in some form of maintenance and we get approval, but we wanted to switch direction later, it would probably impact Andy's budget quite a bit due to the fact Andy would probably already be taking certain things off of his line item budgets for that year or next year, right, and reallocating. So those are great questions, Anna.
Does anybody else have any questions specifically on what was spent so far and what probably is coming?
I would say I appreciate that we're going to post this. There's a lot of chatter about specifics on what's been spent, so that will be very helpful.
Yeah, and we'll try to get that up sooner rather than later too, Anna. We just wanted to share it tonight first. You bet.
All right, I guess that leads us into middle school.
All right, so tonight, Chris Staub from Performance Services is joining me from Performance Services. He's their mechanical engineer. You probably have a better title than that, so it's up to you if you want to get it out there. We're going to go through kind of a little bit of the history again. It's going to be a little bit redundant in the beginning, and then we're going to go into some of the options that Performance Services has worked on for us. As we talked about in the last meeting, the range of costs was pretty wide. We tried to tighten those up as best as we can. They spent a lot more time digging into the availability of equipment, the cost of the equipment, because everything's increasing right now for building materials, and we'll get into that a little bit. So they invested a lot more time. So while there's still a range, the numbers, are tightened. So again, in early March, we identified the heat exchangers on 10 existing rooftop units they were heavily inspected, and we found cracks. There's a picture here. You can kind of see the cracks that are on these. They're on the outside. I wish that wouldn't have happened. Let's see if I can do this. You can see the hairline cracks on the heat exchangers. Now, that wasn't always apparent. It's not like you could just go in there and inspect that. You had to actually take burner assemblies off. What had happened actually back in December is we had a unit that wasn't firing. They took the burner off to see why it wasn't firing, and that's how they found that unit. And then as they were doing some more repairs that were identified, they took that burner off, found more cracked heat exchangers. That's when we halted all repairs on those, and we said to our mechanical contractor, inspect them all, because they're all the same year, they're all the same units. We're probably going to find this a similar situation. Lo and behold, we did. So again, welds on 19 out of 20 heat exchangers were found to have the cracks. This was likely an issue for some time. It just didn't happen this winter. They've probably been failing for several years now, but again, we just found them, and we were very fortunate not to have other situations come out of that. We did do preliminary air testing with environmental management consultants, where we found that there was 0 parts per million of carbon monoxide, and all our carbon dioxide was in an acceptable range. So again, we're currently working with Performance Services to consider the best option moving forward. But before we get into some of these options, Performance Services did kind of go back and take a look at some of their sources on building material costs and what's happening in that world. So as you can see, since January 1st, copper wiring has increased by 58%, metal studs 80%, structural steel 35%, rebar 30%, plastic piping 30%, stainless steel. Some of these don't apply necessarily to this project, but copper wiring does, the carbon and stainless steel does, 40%. Copper tubing and fittings, 8 to 20%. Steve, you would probably know best. Lumber costs have increased as much as 65% since January 1st. So at this point, I'm going to then turn it over to Chris, who will start going through these options.
So what we want to present here first is essentially replacing the existing rooftops that you have. And I want to get into a little bit on why we wouldn't recommend that. And it really comes down to how this system heats and cools your spaces. What you have in your building is what's called a multi-zone system. So that system serves multiple different spaces, each with their own temperature sensor. However, to provide cooling or heating to that space, what occurs in the unit is you have a single fan blowing air, and it can either go through a hot coil or a cold coil. In this case, your hot coil is those gas-fired heat exchangers, and your cold coil is a direct expansion refrigeration system, similar to what you'd have in your house, just on a larger scale and all packaged together in the rooftop. Once the air goes through either of those decks, there's a damper that then blends that air and supplies it to the space. So if this unit is serving 6 zones, which is typical of roughly 6 of your units, if you have one zone that wants to be a little bit warmer and one zone that wants to be colder, both of these decks are running. And this unit is mixing that air. So you're mixing 90-degree air with 55-degree air and supplying it to the space. This is a high energy use to get conditioning within your building. In fact, the national energy code standards that most states look at, one's called ASHRAE, Standard 90.1. They outlawed this type of system in 1989. It took the state of Wisconsin about 10 years to adopt that language into their codes, and since 1999, the system has not been allowed in new construction. Now, it has been grandfathered in, but it is a large energy user, and it's not recommended to stick with this type of system. In fact, because really no one's been doing these types of system concepts for roughly 30 years, it's very hard to even find this type of unit available. You're not getting a standard commodity rooftop unit to do this. These are custom type rooftop units, which is driving costs up if this option was to be used. Hence why we're looking at roughly $2 to $2.2 million just to replace the equipment that you have. There'd probably be roof work associated with that, making sure electrical feeders are appropriately sized, disconnecting and reconnecting gas piping, and getting controls onto these units so that they can correctly operate.
Which something I'll jump in. So as we know, and I think Tony or Bob at one of my first board meetings had brought up about the cooling in the gymnasium over there. We have a couple spaces over there, and it's probably the only spaces district-wide that does not have cooling. We did some testing on that after that board meeting, and we are seeing higher humidity levels, higher temperatures, things like that. So if we went with this project, again, not recommended, but if we went with this project and we tried to add cooling to those spaces, that would require extra electrical work. So keep that in mind as well.
The cost of adding cooling to those 3 zones or 3 areas of the building that currently do not have it is included in that cost. The next system type that we looked at would be replacing those multi-zone units with what's called a variable air volume type system. So this is what code went to help reduce energy costs from the multi-zone type system. You still have a single unit serving multiple different spaces, each with their own temperature control. However, you have a terminal box located in the duct run supplied to the space. That terminal box receives either warm or cold air, only one, and then will provide additional reheat as necessary if that's what's required at the space. So what this does is it changes the fan speed, so you have energy savings in fan energy, and then also reduces how much reheating of air. Now remember before, all of the air that was being blended together, depending on how much came from cooling or heating, you were doing possibly a lot of reheating. This will limit how much reheat is going on based on this box closing down to reduce the amount of airflow, but still maintaining comfortable conditions within your spaces. Some rough calculations for energy savings for this type of system, possibly $15,000 a year in fan energy savings, $4,000 a year in reheat energy savings, and then additional savings in cooling as you can reduce the amount of cooling air supplied to spaces as it's not needed. And there are also potential energy incentives from Focus on Energy. There are actually multiple ways you can do reheat, one being electric duct heaters. Another way would be heating hot water with a boiler plant and distributing that to the VAV boxes. What we're recommending is hot water. Just based on the cost of the energy alone, if you use gas as your fuel source, it's roughly half the cost to operate as electric reheat would be. So we wouldn't be doing you any favors by reducing fan energy and then doubling your reheat costs if we went with electric reheat. So that wouldn't necessitate putting a boiler plant in the middle school. There is a small one in the addition that was put on in 93. But that would not be sufficiently sized to handle all of the reheat needs for the 10 rooftop units that would be replaced. The estimated cost for that was $2.7 to $3 million, including updating all the controls throughout the building, all the VAV boxes that were going in, the entire boiler plant distribution, so on. Knowing that that option was relatively expensive for what the potential budgets could be, we thought, was there some way to get more bang for your buck? And primarily, there are 6 rooftop units that serve multiple zones, mostly classrooms and offices, and then there are 4 that really only serve 1 or 2 large spaces. You've got 1 unit serving the north gym, 1 serving the south gym, 1 serving your cafeteria, and 1 serving your kitchen. You don't save a whole bunch of reheat load on those because there isn't much right now. There's just really a single space being served. There is some fan energy savings that you could get by going to a variable speed fan. But if you took those 4 units being completely replaced out and just did the heat exchanger work, you could save roughly $500,000, still get a lot of energy savings, and you'd be prepped for in the future to replace those units as they are upwards of 17 years old. You've had the heat exchanger issues, and more issues are occurring on those units with their refrigeration systems as time wears on. So that would be a slightly lower cost option. It's viable, but does not give you a complete solution like the prior option would. I should say complete long-term solution. The option 4 listed here is the same concept from an air distribution standpoint. It'd be a variable air volume system, but instead of using a packaged rooftop unit, which typically has a 20 to 25 year life, we'd be looking to move more to an institutional type grade air handler that could be mounted on the roof. Additionally, instead of packaged cooling systems in each of the rooftops, we looked at going to a central chilled water plant. Central chilled water plant is more robust equipment. Institutional air handlers, more robust equipment. You're looking at 30 plus years of life, as opposed to packaged rooftops, like I said, are 20 to 25. Additional costs, obviously with this, because you are now putting another piping, distribution, and plant in, which is reflected in the budget price of roughly $4 to $4.4 million. We view this as, when you're looking at a school and a building that already is 50 years old, you're looking for a long-term solution. This gives you much more equipment life. You get very fine control of your temperatures. You get great indoor air quality, humidity control. You can easily accommodate the ionization that's already been purchased. That can be relocated. Not that it couldn't in the other options, but it can be easily mounted into these units as well. But this is, kind of the ideal sort of heating and cooling you would have for a long-term facility. And then the last option we considered was a.
Just can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So, stupid question. I'm way off everything. So, these guys are probably all right on top of it. All 5 of the board members are probably like, well within what they feel comfortable. I'm going to be honest, that's why I rely on Andy a lot here. But my question to you is, so if you were to do the previous one, which is, you're saying ideally the long-term solution for the facility, and I listened to all the advantages of what you said. So if you were to do any of the other ones, not the previous one, but let's say the second one that you had as a possible solution that you said at least addresses some things from 2.7 to 3, again, I was listening quickly, I was writing, but if the board elected to go that route, then that would not in itself align to if they wanted to change to the most recent one because they're so different, right? Or could it be set up like you're at least utilizing the dollars for the next phase?
And no.
Okay.
The boiler plant would be the same in those two options, but when you start talking about having the packaged cooling, which is each of the 10 rooftops would have their own cooling system, going to a chilled water plant, theoretically you could keep your boiler plant, but you're replacing the equipment on the roof with an air handler down the line, and you still are adding a chilled water plant in the future.
Right. So once they make their commitment to that, if they were, and I'm not saying they would, if they did, I'm just saying they're committed to that methodology and they couldn't go then to the ideal one later.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
There'd be a large dollar cost with that.
You bet. Thank you.
Any other questions while we're?
I guess energy savings, I know you mentioned it around 20,000 possibly on the second option. Does that change much in the third and fourth option so far?
The third option listed, it's slightly less fan energy savings, about 6,000 less.
Okay.
The fourth option, depending on the equipment selected on the cooling side and what sort of partial efficiencies you get in the equipment, you could potentially see cooling cost savings even above and beyond the second or third option.
Okay.
I have a question for you. Third option, you mentioned, I believe it was the energy credits for that. Can you explain that more? Is that something that We Energy is going to give us money for, or how's that going to work?
Correct. So
it's also worth pointing out that pretty much every one of these options will come with energy credits. So, and then we would work with performance services or maybe the mechanical contractor to get us those forms. Matter of fact, I just did that for some boilers recently, working with Focus on Energy to get some of those incentives. So it's really just a matter of the right paperwork and working with the mechanical contractor.
Do you know
that
what those
installs the stuff.
incentives would be off the top of your head?
So there's two paths you can go with focus incentives. One is prescriptive. That is, I have X piece of equipment, it's a certain amount of efficiency, they will give you so many dollars for that. That is easily cataloged on their website. So for instance, I wanted to put in a high efficiency condensing boiler, it's 2 million input BTU, and it's 94% efficient, you get $135 per MBH. Or, not that that's the actual number, I'm just tossing something out. That's the prescriptive method. Likewise, if you put a VFD on something that was a variable frequency drive, it allows you to change the speed of a motor. If you put that on a system that was originally a fixed speed motor, you get $35 a horsepower, just a rough estimate. So that's the prescriptive path. The custom path is where they actually will perform energy modeling, comparing the systems, And based on their estimated gas and electric savings for the change in systems with parameters worked out with the engineers or any architects, because it can occur for new buildings or remodels, hence why it's a custom. They will run those numbers, and based on that, they give you a certain number of cents per savings. And I've got a slide later on that tells what those particular savings are. Or those credits would be. I don't know until they run those energy models what the incentives would be.
Well, our system we have now is highly inefficient, so if we're going to an efficient system, there should be significant credits, I would think.
Yeah,
Am I wrong, or is my
you would get a decent amount of money. With that said, a decent amount might be 30 to 40,000 for a custom incentive. You're not looking at probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And to be honest, Dale, like you're thinking just like I am, you know, like, yeah, that's what you would think would be happening, but we could just never make that promise. We don't want to oversell and underachieve,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, but we don't want to commit to that either, so.
So, actually, the old system is bad, like you said, I agree with that. But there are 4 units that are unique, that won't mix the air. And I think you said it was a $500,000 savings by going that route?
Roughly.
Roughly 500,000. Plus we would get some incentives. We still would have to fix the heat exchangers in those units.
And that's inclusive of the cost. So while still fixing the heat exchangers, putting controls on those units so that they're compatible with the new system that would go in, roughly a $500,000 reduction.
Right. Well, it's a tough call, but
So I don't think we talked about the final option, which is really not recommended. I mean, do you guys want to hear about the not recommended option? Yeah.
Okay. So there's a newer technology in the US. It's been around 20 plus years in foreign markets, less so in the Americas. It's called variable refrigerant flow. So you have a single condenser, and rather than like a rooftop unit where we're blowing air to various spaces, this single the single condenser compressor is moving refrigerant to a terminal unit that's located within the space. So you'd have a high wall fan coil. I don't know if you've seen IT rooms. Typically, there'll be a 3-foot long white shiny plastic thing blowing cold air on you.
yeah.
That would be a high wall. They have ceiling cassettes that go in, a lane grid. They have ducted fan coils. There's multiple different terminal types. So the large compressor is communicating refrigerant to various indoor terminals, and that can provide heating or cooling at those specific units. And they can potentially share that energy across that refrigerant circuit. However, we still need to reject that heat or pull heat from a source. In this case, we're looking at a water source. So that would be a water loop run within the building. That water loop allows all the different compressor condensers to share energy with the water loop and ultimately can possibly share it throughout the building now. Unfortunately, if all of the units are in cooling, like would occur in late spring, early fall, you still need to reject that heat. So we have a water loop, and we'd need to have some sort of heat rejection to the outside. So that would be what we'd call a fluid cooler. Likewise, in the winter, all of those units are pulling heat from that water loop, and that water loop needs to have its temperature maintained. So you're still going to need a boiler to provide heat that can then be pulled by the compressor condenser units. It's a very complex system. There's a lot of complex internal controls, and maintenance can be very difficult. Typically requires specialized technicians. With that said, it has the ability to potentially be energy efficient, but not only do we need all of those devices, we still need to get fresh air to each of the spaces. So we still need to look at some sort of packaged rooftop option to get fresh air and provide conditioned fresh air to each of the rooms. So you have this complex refrigerant water loop along with still having a packaged rooftop unit set up now, like you have now, supplying conditioned air to the spaces. So there's a lot going on with this, and it is extremely complicated, and we wouldn't necessarily recommend going this route. Additionally, because of all of those various moving parts, there's a lot to these systems, and we're looking at roughly $4.5 to $5 million budget for this complex system.
And then from just my perspective, I mean, these were in Europe for years and years. They're finally making their way over to the United States. I only know of one district right now that has a VRF system, and I did actually have a chance to take a look at that several months ago. It doesn't impress me at this point, and I just think about these other options that we have as viable or preferred or recommended solutions, and I know, like in-house, the amount of maintenance that we can take on with those types of systems versus this type of system, the amount of actual maintenance that our in-house staff would be able to do kind of brings this one, down on my list of, that's another reason it's just not recommended, so.
I agree.
So I talked about 3 of the options needing a boiler plant. Andy was nice enough to let me through the building, and we felt while there's an existing individual learning area here, we could possibly make a boiler plant work within that area, not even needing the entire space, but roughly half of it. It's fairly close to the water service. We have plumbing connections available there, and it's not too far from the gas meter to get gas to serve those boilers. If the option 4 or 5 were taken, we looked at possibly having a chiller or fluid cooler out by the kitchen or cafeteria. I don't think there's any windows that would be affected in either of those locations, and it reduces visibility from the street, and hopefully would address any noise concerns at property lines. We already touched on this a little bit. My recommendation, if you do go away from the multi-zone, a custom incentive approach would capture the most incentive for you because it will capture that mixing of air. There really isn't a prescriptive approach to capture those cost savings. So we'd recommend custom incentive with that. And remember, these are based off of their energy calculations. For every kilowatt hour saved, they'd give you 4 cents. For every peak kW reduced, you'd get $100. And for every therm saved, they give you 80 cents. And that's a one-time lump sum based on the project moving forward, being constructed and verified by the Focus on Energy staff. And that's at no cost to the school district. This is just something that's built into the Public Service Commission's rules.
All right, so we put kind of a timeline together. When we first met, it seemed a little bit more critical at that point. It's still critical. However, as we started looking, as Performance Services started looking at the timelines of the engineering design, because again, this is preliminary. Those numbers, we haven't selected products. It depends upon what direction the board wants us to go. Once we have direction from the board on how to proceed, then we can start looking at the actual selection of products. How are we going to control the system? Can we stick with our current control system? Because it is a newer control system. Are we touching ceilings or not touching ceilings? How good is the ductwork? There's some costs in there to really investigate the ductwork. Based on the ductwork testing, Do we have to touch a significant amount of ductwork, or are we okay with that? So again, these numbers are still preliminary, but to move forward, we're gonna need some sort of direction. Once we have that direction, then there's the engineering design phase, which would take about 4 to 6 weeks. Then we would go out for competitive bidding. Anybody could bid on that. We would invite, contractors we work with. We would take recommendations for other contractors that we feel would be able to complete this project. But right now, it would be very difficult to find available contractors because they all have their work lined up. You can find them, but you're paying a premium. They're like, okay, we will try to do this, X, Y, and Z. You probably won't get the full project done. You maybe start piecing it together. And then again, material shortages that are causing price and lead time issues. So based on that, so major equipment lead time is 12 weeks. If we were able to move forward, like at, let's just say today for hypothetical, if we were able to look at today, we still wouldn't even be starting this project until early, the school year, okay? Well, then that creates disruption to the education portion of us, and, because we got to get into the classrooms. We're going to be on the roof. We're going to be doing making a lot of noise. So that really is not the recommended timeline. We still need a direction to start bidding or start scoping this out and fully engineering it. But that would put us to a little bit later to take advantage of, people coming off of jobs, mechanical contractors coming off of jobs, which is more ideal to start working with them at that point. You're going to get better pricing by that, by shoring the projects up and saying, we're going to start this project, say, late spring, early summer. It just works. It's a benefit to the district by going that route. And then we're hoping that the material prices will start settling, either come back to where they were, before January, or at least come down to where they're not right now. So there's benefits. So, to kind of pushing this out. But then you guys might be asking yourself, well, what about this carbon monoxide situation? What about the carbon dioxide? We're continuously monitoring that. As I started, thinking back to that first heat exchanger that we had, we lost flame on that. We weren't able to even run that heat exchanger. We were not able to run that burner. So it's more likely that in a situation where the heat exchanger starts to open up, those cracks start to open up more, it's more likely that we're going to have a flame failure because of it'll either roll out the flame or we're going to have like a pressure fluctuation that won't even allow it to ignite, which will then trip it out on the safety. So knowing that, I felt a little bit safer thinking about trying to push this project out. In addition to the continuous air sampling that we're gonna do. Now, let's say that we do have a situation where we're finding carbon monoxide. Well, we can replace the heat exchanger. We can buy time by shutting that unit down, bring in some equipment to bring in the fresh air and do the heating temporarily. Get a heat exchanger just like we did with the last one. Replace that heat exchanger and limp along until the next, until we actually have the project scoped out and the timeline built for doing that project. And again, we're always going to monitor this equipment. We're going to monitor it more than we normally would have. So that builds us some time. Anything to add to that, Chris? So that's it. Now, questions?
Guess what's your recommended solution out of well, you said fifth
So-
one, get rid of, but
I always worry about money.
I know.
I worry about it more in this district. I can tell you my preferred solution is the one that said preferred solution, because I know the equipment. We're talking air handlers, we're talking boiler system. If a boiler goes down, we can replace it. We will have redundancy. It's just the likeliness of something big like this happening again is unlikely, okay, where we're gonna have a complete makeover, right? We're not going to have these rooftops that are going to fail. It's just not, in the in-house we can, I'm going to go back to that. In-house we can do a lot more maintenance on those types of systems. But so that's this system. Option 4. That would be my preferred solution, okay? But knowing the cost, that would not be my recommendation to the board unless you guys were able to find the funds to do that big of a project.
I'm kind of like because of the money situation, like you, I think we'll be leaning towards that one where we keep 4 units, fix them, and then do the other ones that are doing the sharing of the air, convert them over to the new modern system,
So this is the one that Dale's speaking about.
Pick up the incentives, save the 500,000. And, because we're already $2 million, 2.4 if my eyesight's correct. So the money's not there, that's the problem.
Yeah, if we use ESSER for some of it or a chunk of it, that's still gonna be probably close to $1 million short.
Yeah, so just keep in mind, so this is 2.4 to 2.6. Excuse me. This one's 2.7 to 3, okay? And again, these are based on some of these inflated numbers. Again, we won't make promises that this is going to magically decrease by the time we actually go out to bid, but in hopes that it go out to bid, these numbers are, I don't want to say generous, but they're higher numbers, okay? So let's just say that the previous one comes at 2.6. This one could come in at 2.7. It could come in at 2.4, and this could come in at 3 million. We're talking, you know, there's a range there that, you know, once we get into this, once we decide on a design, we might be thinking back like, well, could we have done those 4 other rooftops or 3 other rooftops? I'm just going to be honest with you. If we were able to find the money in the funds, this would be my recommendation. We already have the project going to be scoped. We will have the cranes there. Doing the project all at once is also, and I'm sure you probably worked some of that into your numbers already, but doing the project all up front is also a money saver as well. I agree with you, Dale, about the 500,000, but again, my recommendation would be option 3, not 3A, just getting those rooftops done. All of them.
It would be nice if we could find the money, that's the problem.
Yep,
We're
I
gonna be
understand.
finding the money, and no matter how hard we fundraise, that's a lot of money to come up with.
And option 3A, you do get option 3, you do get cooling in your gymnasiums, which is not currently cooled. Option 3A would not add cooling. You're just replacing the heat exchangers.
We're just extending the life of that equipment is what we're doing with 3A
Right.
by replacing the heat exchangers.
And not only think of air conditioning as cooling there, it also dehumidifies. So you can control moisture levels within your space and prevent damage to your building structures.
And that's been an issue in that gym for 50 years.
Yeah. So, and then just keep in mind that this option and 2 of the other ones, we already have VAV systems around the district. You know, they're proved, they're tried and true, they're proven to be successful, and, you know, you can really get down and do your individual zone control, you know, those sort of things, where right now you don't really have that much control on the current system either. So, but again, this one, we already see what those VAVs do for us. Therefore, a VAV system versus even that VRF system, you know, I just wouldn't recommend that one, which I made clear earlier.
So looking at the 2 options we're talking about, because I mean, it seems like those are the 2 that are on the
3
table.
and 3A, yeah.
Yeah. So it sort of feels like 3A to me is a fix 50% of the problem, kick the can down the road perhaps on the other 50%. So asking the unfair question, because that's what we get to do and we get to put you on the spot. You know, we know that we're talking about a $100,000 to $600,000 potential spread between the 2 options. I guess the question is, what's the likelihood that 36 months after we have the crane move the new units, we're going to end up back on the second half, on the refurbished half, in the same place that we are? Where we're going to see another significant repair that comes out of this and not having done it.
On those existing units?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have that list in front of me, but we're seeing where we're gonna have to replace burners, compressors. You know, there's, that type of equipment is also failing. Now, again, is the cost not something that we can handle within my budget? Yeah, then I have to just, you know, reallocate something out of the budget. You know, is every single compressor accounted for? We can afford to replace a compressor here and there. That's built into the budget. But if it starts to become, you know, over there at those gym units or the kitchen units, and then we start having some here at the high school, because we have rooftops here at the high school, you know, that could start compounding a little bit. So what you're saying is accurate, but not predictable.
So right, the compressors, the fan motors, the contactors, the capacitors.
Yep, those are all replaceable parts.
Yeah, so,
Well, we have to sub out most of that. Just keep that in mind.
okay. And it really, it's not really 50, it's like the 4 units and replace the other is probably like 65% or 70% of the total heating, cooling over there would be brand new, and maybe 30% would be the leftover, I think, for the 4 units. That sound about right? So,
Yeah, we're talking 10 total units, 6 getting replaced in
Oh.
option 3A.
okay, so for some reason I thought there was 4 units that that we would keep and then replace everything else. Is that wrong or right?
No, you're just saying it the opposite way. So 6 would be replaced, 4 would remain.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
So 60/40.
60/40. Okay. But the 4 that remaining are individual units that are small. And we don't have the issue of mixing in the air with the hot and the cold.
The 4 units that would potentially remain are technically 2-zone units. A gym unit also feeds a little bit of air into the girls' locker room, another one into the boys' locker room in the gym. And the cafeteria, just based on the size of the unit, is split up into an east-west zone.
So all these units are pretty much exactly the same. They're all 12-ton units. The only difference is the cooling portion on they're all the same size, only cooling was never put on the gym and locker rooms and kitchen
Oh, I got you. Okay.
and cafeteria.
Andy, I couldn't see the timeline from here at all. So can you talk about the dates a little bit more? What is your ideal timeline to have approval to start and to actually plan for the work to be happening?
Yep.
Sure. So after approval, typically it takes 4 to 6 weeks for engineering to go through and put together a design. Working with Focus could probably occur during bidding, though you'd like to have the number that they're going to be providing really before you get into bidding, so you can make any tweaks if there is something that's, I'd say, low-hanging fruit, that you can add a decent amount of incentive dollars without too much added cost. For instance, I don't believe you're doing CO2 monitoring in classrooms.
We are not doing that currently.
So you can easily do CO2 monitoring, which looks at, CO2 is a direct correlation with the number of people in a space. So the state code requires us to provide a certain amount of air. If you sense that CO2 levels are lower, you can technically lower your outside air amount. Outside air is a very high energy driver to heat and cool the ventilation air. We already have that included in our design, but that's just an example of something that they might know of that they could give us a value of, hey, if you implemented this, you could easily add in this much more to your incentive. Bidding typically would take a minimum of 2 weeks. That's about the bare minimum you ever want to give a contractor. There's a lot going on. They need to do takeoffs of our plans, get out to the site, look at the space, and get a lot of equipment priced out. Typically, I'd like to say at least 3 weeks, and then there's all the contracting that occurs after that. So if we were looking to bid in, say, late September, we'd probably be looking for approval, generously sometime late June. That gives us roughly 2 months. That's, hedging my bet a bit on the engineering design. I get almost 8 weeks. But if you did go into July a bit to make that decision, I don't know that that would affect the project design and bidding. There's also flexibility. Because the work wouldn't occur until spring of the following year, we don't necessarily need to go out in early September. Just with those contractors coming off jobs, looking for the next job to get into their queue, we might find more aggressive pricing at that time from the contractors if we hit them in September rather than delaying that into October or November. Additionally, there are other school projects, and they're all looking at work next year. They might also be putting designs on the street for bidding near the end of the year. So if we can get a jump on that in early fall, it'd be preferred. Did I answer your question?
I think so. So I mean, we're saying the work would happen next summer, ideally, the summer of '22,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, so we
And so
minimize disruption to your learning environment. Because essentially we're looking at craning things over the building. We have to create a boiler room if we're looking at either option 3 or 3A. Additionally, you are running distribution piping throughout the building, so corridor ceilings would be down. I don't think you want kids necessarily exposed to all of the utilities running above the ceiling. Additionally, we need to cut into ductwork, possibly seal ductwork, insulate ductwork. So we're opening up a lot of the ceilings in daily paths that the students would normally be walking down. So
Sure.
hence the recommendation to do the work over the summer.
And I know we can't predict how long the current system can limp along, and I don't have my notes from the last meeting in front of me, but to repair all of them, Andy, I think you mentioned some range of cost.
Yeah, to actually replace the heat exchangers, which
Yep.
would be the only option, would be about $120,000. So 2 units, you're looking at, or there's 2 coils or 2 heat exchangers per unit. We have 19, and the one heat exchanger I did was right around $6,000. So it's $6,000 per heat exchanger, and times that by 19. So
If this went out to bid, say late summer, early fall, could it be bid with a combination of 3A and 3B? Do a base bid of 3A and then do an alternate add-on if we wanted to go to replace the other 4
Absolutely,
units?
and then you'd have firm competitive pricing showing what the true difference is between the cost.
because they're pretty much the same system,
Right.
it's just less.
I would
units.
think it'd be an easy bid item to add in.
So are
That's
you
correct.
bidding off of drawings only, or do you actually write the contract?
We would have a request for, we'd have a RFP, a request for proposal. So, yeah.
Write off of drawings only? Or you just hand them drawings and you say bid this job?
So there'd be a full scope narrative
Yeah.
that's given to the contractors along with a specifications booklet and drawings to cover all the necessary scope items. And we try to get 2 to 3 at a minimum bidders for each of the areas of work, whether that's roofing, structural steel, mechanical equipment, mechanical contractors, plumbing contractors, electrical contractors, control contractors, general trades, protecting the floor, taking the ceilings out, reinstalling them, insulation contractors, the whole gamut.
Do you guys write the scope and the specifications?
Correct. PSI would be the one running the entire project, so from scope to construction management.
So in those specifications or in that scope, in the event that material costs drop, would we be able to get that savings?
Yes, I believe.
Would you specify that
So-
specifically?
So I wish Lauren was here, but I've done work with Performance Services, and they have like a no change order situation, like you just can't, they're not gonna add costs, but they've always come under. So every invoice goes to Kathy, so she can see what the costs are, and then that all comes off of that original scope and that original cost. And if there's funds left over, we do get those back.
Yeah,
So
I'm just thinking, material costs come down, there'd be more savings. Because if we do move this out to spring, and we actually do it in spring, there's a good possibility that material costs will come down. They're gonna bid probably on current material costs. We don't know if they come down, where could be significant savings. We just need to make sure we capture that through specifications or whatever.
I've never seen a bid that lets me lower or give them money back after it's bid.
Well, they have, so I can just tell you that, yeah, if we're purchasing equipment, in this case, the district will be purchasing equipment, so we're gonna save there. However, the invoicing, I wish Lauren was here, so obviously a mechanical, he's the mechanical engineer. He's the more important of all of them for us. We can find that answer out, Dale, for sure. I don't think that's gonna prevent us from making a decision, but I think it's a really good question, so.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a possibility that we can capture some savings out of this with lowered material costs,
Sure, yeah, if you're purchasing the items, you're not gonna
I
purchase.
mean,
it
and that's
till the
another
last
reason
minute,
why,
so-
sorry,
Yeah.
Ted. Another reason pushing this out is probably gonna benefit us, expecting that these costs of materials will settle or go back to pre-January 1st. If they don't, that's your question that I will get an answer for.
Well, I
So
think
at the time of
material
the
costs are
project-
probably due to the COVID situation, people not being at the job producing materials.
Possible, I'm
so-
hearing a lot of different reasons
Yeah, it's
why
all kinds of
pricing's
things.
going
Yeah,
up,
so hopefully those reasons go away and things settle down a little bit. That's what we hope for, you know. So,
Okay, so what do you need tonight? You need authorization to continue with the design, or?
Well, we need to decide what design we're gonna go with to continue. That's really what I need. Now, I don't know if you guys are really prepared, if you want us to come back with more information. You know, the only piece of information I think that I could provide at this point is the answer to Dale's question. But again, I don't know that that would hold anything up, but if you guys need more time just to think it over, definitely respect that. But at this point, we just need a direction so that PSI can then go to work and start really
do
developing
you
the
have a
scope.
paper, something on paper that we can look at? I mean, personally, I can't read that, it's too far away.
No,
but-
absolutely. I mean, I can get you the presumption. We can provide that to you.
So, I think for me, I'd like to mull it over a little bit more and think about it, just because it's a big decision and there's a lot of dollars here. So, if I have a piece of paper in front of me and I can look at the different options and think it
Sure.
over, you know.
And for me, if I could ask, if we're not making the decision tonight, then at the May board meeting, if we're gonna use ESSER funds for it or not.
Andy, I need help understanding why we don't want to just do the welding and, not welding, sorry, replacing of the
So
The heat
again,
exchangers, yeah.
the equipment is 17 years old,
Mhm.
okay? These units probably should have saw 20 years, but, you know, the heat exchangers have failed. We know that. When we start talking about the other failures that we're seeing and the impact that that could have, you know, a unit being down from time to time, it just, do we want to invest $120,000 into those units when really we should be looking to do something? And that's maybe the question, right? Is that really the option? I think it's time to replace that, but that might not be the consensus. So yes, that is still an option, and actually if you saw, you know, there was some of these other options were missing from the first presentation. That was option 1, I think. So yeah, that still is an option. We didn't think that the board would be interested in going that way, so we took that off. But if that changes, we can bring that back as well. But investing into a piece of equipment that is essentially at its life expectancy, seeing failures, we could put those heat exchangers in there and then they fail again. We don't know how fast those heat exchangers failed. We don't know how fast those welds broke, you know. We might only get 5-10 years. That's just not predictable either, so, on a new heat exchanger.
I kind of been thinking the same way along with Ann. I look at where we're gonna get $2.5 million, right? And if we could potentially buy ourselves 3 or 4 years by spending $120,000, $150,000 on new heat exchangers, why are we looking at spending $2.5 million when we've got so many other needs? I mean, I'd love to upgrade it, love to do the $4 million system, but I look at, we were talking all this $2 million and where are we getting it from?
Yeah.
Right? Your budget needs all the things you could do with $2 million.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, we didn't know until we saw all of these options. You know, it's important to be able to review, I think, small, medium, large, you know, and all of it. But I just didn't understand. Of course, we don't know. They could break in 2 days or 2 years or, right, we don't know. But I think that should still be an option on the table.
Okay.
I think one of the big things, and I agree, it can be an option on the table. I think all things should be considered. I think one of the big things to discuss, trust me, I would prefer not to be utilizing ESSER to the middle school HVAC units, but the reality is I'm strongly believing that it's going to align to the use of ESSER. I mean, I'm not promising, but I believe it aligns pretty strongly. where I agree, Steve, that we obviously have a prioritization of needs, right? And we clearly can go beyond the 8 million that we already identified in the referendum question. This is even in that question. But the ESSER funds might not be able to be utilized towards any of those other needs anyways that Andy might have in that prioritization. So the question that you might have to think about is it just the proper time in regards to the funds we're getting to take advantage and utilize towards a large-scale need that we have?
Andy, let me ask you this. How old are the other units, like at the high school and here?
So I don't have that exact breakdown, but there's some that are older, 99, and then there's some that are newer, So we did go into those units based on that situation over there, and we didn't find that same situation, but they're a different style unit as well.
Right.
But so what we're working on, and actually my next presentation we'll get into that a little bit more, but we are working right now to develop a comprehensive list of all our HVAC system, anything mechanical related. And when I look at those units, again, we're not seeing as many failures as we are with these Four Seasons or Seasons 4. Everything seems in the realm of being able to take care of on an annual basis as those repairs happen, because the repairs happen,
So just poorly manufactured units?
Yeah, that's, I think you and I would agree on that. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And to have
To
10 of
the
them.
greater question, can we look at a list for next meeting of the proposed use of the ESSER 2 funds in one place? I mean, I earmarked the things that we needed this year that are variables currently unknown for cleaning and supplies and staff and all of those things. That's a list of expenses we may have. This is one project that we could use. Again, trying to understand all of the options to then decide what we want to apply for versus one-off and getting things sort of dripped in and then wishing maybe we would have made a different choice. And maybe some of you are already really aware of what's all out there as potential, but I'm definitely not. So I could use some more information on
I
that.
think that we can provide that, Anna, to the board. One of the things will be, due to the fact that, again, going over the operational timeline of the subcommittees that are working and they're utilizing a survey that has yet to come out in the information. So realistically, moving the board meeting up to the 10th, we probably won't have from the operational model the needs. That'll be on the 7th of June, which is still in time, I mean, in my mind, because Andy has said and Chris were saying that this project's next summer. So if I can provide a timeline, I think 7th of June is when we will provide a list of, from the operational model standpoint of what we're envisioning will be needed from an operational recommendation for next fall, and we can go over projects. And so you guys can start recognizing and going, it's a large scale list, where are we gonna designate and to how? And and honestly, it's a Rubik's Cube, as we always say. It is a puzzle. I mean, all the systems you got to work on at one time. I mean, there's a lot of needs. But we can provide that in June, I think, if that, due to the fact, hearing that it's next summer, which I knew about earlier in the day from Andy, it provides time
So the one thing that I'm a little pushed on
for the fiscal.
is the fiscal
Yep.
year. The fiscal year end is June 30th, and DPI said they would like us to keep expenses and revenues in the same fiscal year again. So the one thing is, if we're going to apply ESSER 2 funds to that list of like $460,000 that we spent this year, I'm gonna need to know that ideally at the May board meeting, because again, then I have to go through and break that into all of the different subcategories in the grant. Like there's a website portal you go into then to make the request for what you're gonna spend the money on in the grant. And you have to sit there and you have to go down different pull down menus and figure out, okay, I'm gonna claim, or I'm gonna request to claim $5,000 in subsection 2, item A, and then in
Sure.
subsection 8, item 3, I'm gonna claim $3,000. So again, if that is gonna be used, that's gonna take some time.
Kath, I'll even do you one on, and maybe the board doesn't feel comfortable, but I would propose the board highly considering that tonight as a motion in action of utilizing out of the $750 that we know we have in ESER two, towards already allowing Kathy to apply that towards the $460,000 that we have already expended this year out of the COVID-related expenses. And then you truly know, okay, we've got the $290 left and maybe the estimate of the 1.5. I mean, we're going to have to pay the $460.
Yeah, we have no option
It's
there.
either, there's really no option. It's either out of the whichever ESER or it's gonna be fund balance. So I would highly recommend making a motion, have the discussion tonight, and maybe giving the direction to already do that tonight.
The one piece, and it is a puzzle, it's a constant puzzle, is we are running ahead of budget this year. So remember, last year we ran ahead of budget considerably, added $700,000 to fund balance last year. This year, we're also, I forgot to point it out in the fiscal report, the bottom of the front page of the fiscal report, the first one that has the line items and your numbers by fund, we're running about 3 to 4% below average expenditures in previous years. So, and that was what the next item on the agenda was going to be too, is that we have identified some maintenance needs, but, you
Yeah,
know,
so Andy's gonna go over those, which we're proud of, because we believe we can address some things that we also think are critical to at least have those be addressed this year, which then, they're on Andy's list of different tiers of budgets and a prioritization, which then allows him, and he can go into greater detail, he'll free up funds for him to do other needs, right? That were already within his budgeted needs next year. So this helps, obviously, to reprioritize again. So, I mean, that's not a bad thing. I will say, you know, it comes with a budget, a positive variance comes with different rationales and reasons to it. Yes, it's quality spending, but unfortunately, we had to make tough decisions last year, which compound into the budget. And yeah, it benefits us on a positive variance this year, but it came at tough decisions last year. Right? So.
But either way, it makes sense to use those ESSER funds for the expenses already spent, because there should be no question on it from DPI.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I would make that motion to have Kathy proceed with the submission to DPI for the use of the ESSER funds for the expenses already completed.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Well, Andy, maintenance.
Any other questions related to the mechanicals at the middle school?
So you'll get out kind of the slideshow and kind of the presentation with the option of just where it was last time.
So I think what I'll do is I'll collaborate again with Performance Services, see if there's, we'll add that option 1 back into the presentation. Maybe collaborate a little bit, see what other information that seems pertinent to help you guys make a decision, and then get that to you, maybe by the end of the week at the latest.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep, that'd be great.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
All right,
Andy.
thank
For your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Europe again, Mr. Daniels.
All right, so because we have a couple new board members and we have some really good questions, actually, talking with like Chris and Kathy, and then even talking about how to use some of the positive variants, I felt like it was maybe a good time to just start discussing or kind of giving some information on, our facilities and our staff, okay? Kind of calling it the State of the Buildings and Grounds Address. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is how are decisions made in the facilities department? What is the makeup of the facilities department team? What routine work is performed by the facilities team? What type of facility studies have been conducted? Does the district use an ongoing facility plan to assist with decisions? What upcoming work will be conducted by the facilities team, so in-house? And then what work traditionally has required contracted services, and then we'll finish off with some of the projects that we felt that we could use that positive variance for to kind of get us a little bit ahead for the next fiscal year, which I'll talk about then goals, of money that is coming out of the positive variance that would have been, allocated to the budget for the 21-22 year. Okay, so when we start making decisions, when I start looking at projects and I start listening to, the issues, principals might come to me with things, Chris might come to me with things, we start thinking about like health and safety. That's the number one, right? So indoor air quality, making sure that we're cleaning our facilities. Is this a liability? A slip, trip and fall situation. If it's up there, if it's a high on the safety list, we're going to try to find a way to do it. Just like these heat exchangers, that's a high quality that could impact, the school district from an indoor air quality sense. Then we start looking at, well, at least I start looking at educational impact. Does it have a positive impact? Does it have a negative impact? And what I mean by that is, if we do something to the space, is that a positive impact? So LED lighting, a good lighting in a facility could have a positive impact. It's called the optimal learning environment. There's actually studies done on indoor air quality and lighting in facilities. So if we do something like that, that's a positive impact. Or whatever situation is happening right now, is that causing a negative impact? Again, going back to those mechanicals, on those rooftops at the middle school, that's a negative impact. So that kind of brings that up. It ties into the health and safety. We had a domestic hot water heater go on a Sunday afternoon. We found it through building checks. That's health, safety, and educational impact. I haven't ever shut down a building because of facilities, and I will do everything I can to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we got working with our mechanical contractor and their plumbing department, and was able to get that done. So that's what kind of makes it move up the priority list. And then operational improvements. Will it improve our energy savings, much like Dale's talking about with the LED lightings? Will it improve processes? So maybe buying a riding scrub machine versus, a walk behind. Now we can scrub more square footage in an evening. Staff training. If I start training my staff more, whether it's in-house or sending them out to get some training, that's improving our operational processes, that they'll get more done, or I can lean on them to do more maintenance, things like that. And then budgets. What's a need versus a want? Okay, so carpeting in the classroom is probably going to be a want. Replacing flooring down the hall because it has asbestos in it and it's starting to fail, that's a need. And that we're in that situation, matter of fact, and you'll hear a little bit about that later on. So it's really just looking at the needs and the wants. And we do have a list that Bob Ellis, my predecessor, started that categorizes it, and then also goes through, is it a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? Is it health and safety? Is it a replacement? Is it a repair? He's got this all broken down, and that's something that I'm going to continue to use, and I'm very fortunate that he started. So who is our facility teams? I'm not going to mention them by names, but at each building we basically have 2 full-time custodians. So Little Prairie, 2 full-time custodians, 2 part-time custodians. Same at Prairie View Middle School. High School has 3 full-time custodians and 2 part-time custodians. Dobeck has 1 part-time custodian, but she only works 2 days a week. She generally works 1, but because of the COVID situation, we upped it to 2 days a week. And then we have 2 full-time groundskeepers. And then other facility staff that we do have 2 part-time high school Saturday custodians. They each take a shift. They're both 5-hour shifts, so they work 1 day a week for 5 hours. And then we also have a part-time delivery driver that delivers our mail and distributes lunches around the district. And then she also helps out at the end of the day in the high school. Here they are, not all of them, but this is our team. And I consider them a team. That's kind of like where I come from, is making sure that everybody feels like it's an actual team. So a lot of people think, well, I'm just the Little Prairie custodian. No, you're the East Troy Community School District custodial team or maintenance team. So here we got custodians from all over. They help each other out, and that's one of the things that I set forth. It's like, just because you're at Little Prairie doesn't mean you can't go over to Prairie View and help out. And they did that, and I'll show you pictures of that. Just because you're at the high school doesn't mean you go to the middle school. You're right across the street. You can give each other a helping hand. And they love that. It's working out really well. I just received a compliment from the district delivery driver. She sent an email and carbon copied me thanking 2 other custodians for always helping them out with some of the bigger packages that she has to deliver around the district. Very proud of that. Okay, so what do they do? So with the exception of the first shift, full-time custodians, most of them are tasked with, especially specifically the part-timers, and then the full-time evening, most of their work is made up of event setups and cleaning, okay? We are moving in the direction of training all full-time custodians and even some of the part-time custodians on facility maintenance. It's an online module. It costs me $100 per year. They get training modules assigned to them 3 to 4 a month, and it's just starting to build that knowledge, because even if it's a part-time custodian that's cleaning, if she finds something broken in the bathroom, maybe she doesn't fix it, but now she knows what to call it through that training. Now she can say, hey, that flush valve is leaking. I think you're going to need a diaphragm. You may as well take the Sloan wrench. You know, it's at least going to allow us to receive more knowledge of what the repair is, so that then somebody else can go in there and fix it without us having to sub out that work. So again, those people do event support, cleaning, like I said. I'm calling it light medium maintenance. Light maintenance, I'm talking about changing light bulbs, ballasts, outlets, up to medium maintenance, where we just replaced an entire shaft in an air handling unit during the spring break. We actually finished that up after spring break. And then with the grounds, they obviously do the grounds work, mowing, athletic field maintenance, striping, that sort of thing. Maintenance on all of their equipment, their mowers, their tractors, their stripers, their aerators, that sort of thing. And then they also provide transportation support, where they also do some of the sub-bus driving and van driving. And then we do have a sub list, but a lot of these custodians, you know, if we have somebody out, we might go to them and saying, hey, can you pick up an extra shift? In an extra shift, if we have somebody that's down for 8 hours, we might say, can you just go in there, get in there for 6 hours? Or if it's a part-time person, like one of our Saturday custodians that's only working 1 day a week, we might ask them to go in and do an extra shift just to provide some custodial coverage if somebody calls in sick. So here's some of the guys. So last winter, on the top left-hand corner, you see Gabe, our lead custodian at the high school, shoveling around roof drains. Again, we have our own roof inspections. This year, with the amount of snow that never really dissipated, never evapped off, or the sun just never took care of it, started building up around their roof drains. So the guys went up there and started shoveling around the roof drains during one of their inspections. We have Dan and Dan, our little Prairie View. They're just starting to dive into the situation in the air handler, where we had like a high-pitched squeal that was happening. After investigating it, they found that the shaft was worn. Apparently the bearing was loose. The set screw wasn't tight. Something as simple as a set screw that wasn't tightened down caused a failure on the shaft. So we quick ordered the shaft, and within a week we had that back together. And then we have Dan and Dan again. Both guys have a mechanical background. Very fortunate to have that. So there's something wrong with the belt. It wasn't aligned right. It was flopping off. So they went in there, laser aligned everything. They just had to move the motor around in the driven pulley. And then we have Ron, who's actually doing some antimicrobial spraying at the high school here, actually. So he's normally at Prairie View. He came over to help during the spring break to reapply the antimicrobial coating to help combat COVID. Okay, so what type of facility studies have been conducted? So I have on records some of my own and some of what Bob Ellis has done in the past, but we've studied certain systems, right? We got a comprehensive plan on our roofing, which we use to develop the plan for the referendum projects. That roofing plan not only talks about replacement costs, but it also talks about repair costs and how to extend the life of your roofs. Something that was started before me. I continue to do that because Bob was using the same company as I was. Parking lots, same thing. He always used parking lot maintenance, PLM. They have a comprehensive plan on our parking lots, which is somewhat dated. I met with them recently. They're going to actually update their list. Electrical plans. He worked with an electrical company to go through all the panels. What panel is recommended to be replaced. Breakers, are they needed to be tightened down? Just going through all the electrical systems. Mechanical. Bob had already done that, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm working with our mechanical contractor. It's very time consuming. They probably already have 16 to 20 hours in our facilities going through room by room looking for anything mechanically related. When we get that plan back from them, it's going to have age of equipment, when should we possibly replace it, what's the cost of replacement, it's comprehensive. Chemical safety, that was done not too long ago through environmental management consultants. We're actually going to be working with a high school chemistry teacher to go back and just check that. Chemical safeties within the chemistry departments. Slip, trips, and falls, Bob worked with our EMC insurance to do an audit of the district, and then that helps us build into the list if we see the concrete raising or, some type of uneven surface, how can we resolve that? That's in the plan. Lighting, as I mentioned earlier, Dale, I worked with a lighting company. I have that plan. And it's all these hot water systems, asbestos audits, PA systems, and then there was a full facility assessment done by one of the architects we used in the past. I'm going to move forward with doing that with PSI. It's no cost. It's going to take a lot of time, but it'll match up to some of these other studies that we've done, like the roofing and the mechanicals. We'll bring all that together into one full plan. And then in-house, we also do our own studies, like flooring. We have on a flash drive what type of flooring is where. Same with not painting, same with proximity access and camera systems, fire alarm systems. We not on the flash drive, but in another document, we have the age of our custodial equipment. We have the age of our grounds equipment. When is it likely going to become due? Can we extend it? And then when is it going to come due? And then painting is just something else that we can take requests. You kind of know the age of the building or the age of the rooms and the last time it was painted. That's actually on that flash drive. Okay, so does the district use an ongoing facilities plan to assist with decision making? Yes, we do. So we have an ongoing facility maintenance plan, and I'm going to show you that shortly. This is what I talked about. I was very fortunate that Bob Ellis had started, and I'm going to continue with it. The plan is broken down by building in categories. It's updated throughout each year, and the plan tracks work completed and new work is added as identified. So nothing comes off of it, so that way you can always go back and look at see what you've done. Anna, Dale, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to see this, but I'll just go over it a little bit. So starting at the top, this is the high school. Each building, like I said, is going to be very similar. So the first light, it's all in alphabetical order. We got our asbestos-containing building materials removal. So there's various locations. It looks here like Bob removed some in 2007 and 2013. Our asphalt driveways, as I said, we worked with parking lot maintenance for our plan. Each year, so what's on here is not just the projects themselves of what we need to do, but it's also just your annual maintenance as well. So annually, you're going to do some type of crack filling. You're going to do possibly some seal coating. You're definitely going to do some line striping. So all that is in this plan. And I'll skip some of them because I don't want to take up all the time, but I think you're getting the idea. But again, we have our electrical on there. We have fans. We have fencing. And I stopped. This is a snippet, okay? And then I think I pulled up, I think this was the middle school. So some of this on here would be also maybe wish list items, that it's just going to be a want. So if you see here, NW, one's a need, one's a want. So obviously if it's a want, it's less likely to get done, unless we find some different funding that says you can only use it for something specific to that. But again, it's looking at the brick and mortar of our buildings. Like here, we got a want here, solar photovoltaic, solar panels. That's a want. Maybe if at some point, there's major energy incentives that really makes that ROI, return on investment, come back and make it, more likely that we would actually see that ROI, then maybe that's when we would tackle that. But right now, those incentives just aren't there. But I could keep going with that, but I think you get the gist of it. So, and then anything over here is stuff that was done. I have some 2020 stuff that was done. I cut that off. But so in some of these retrofit exterior windows, various locations. Nope, wrong one, I'm sorry. Replace water softener system, lower mechanical. That was done in 2018. So these dates are actually tracking, or years are actually tracking what was done.
So how far are you with the LED lighting, percentage-wise?
So I would say half, if you're going to put me with a percentage.
50%?
So in the project summary from the referendum, we were at about $750,000 worth of LED lighting that could have been done. Just so you're aware, though, the exterior of the building had a lot of failing LED lights that were already done, so we did update those. And then I did apply for the focus on energy credits for that because there was some payback on that. So exterior lighting's on, a lot more in the evenings. That's, and it's obviously for safety as well. That's why I made that decision to make sure that we had our exterior lighting done well. So safety and then the incentives made that happen. So. Okay, so What's our facilities team gonna be doing? So summer work. So this is nothing new. They detail the whole building. Furniture gets moved, it gets cleaned, moved, floors get done, furniture gets moved back. But then they do, and that's, floors get scrubbed, floors that receive wax get waxed. We start talking about like operational improvements to make us better or change our processes. As we replace VCT, vinyl composite tile, we're gonna go to LVT, luxury vinyl tile, because it doesn't take as much labor to clean that. You don't need to wax that stuff. Or we may even go to carpeting, because that's something that Bob started. I never was a fan of it until I got here, and now I see the benefits of having the carpeting, the carpet tiles installed. So, but that improves our operational processes from our custodial standpoint. Preventative maintenance tasks, which would include Dale's Wheelhouse, HVAC. We're doing filters, we're coil cleaning, belt checks, bearing lubrication, so on and so forth. That list could have probably went out to that wall. Furniture PM. So every piece of furniture that's touched, they're actually going through, making sure that, like a desk. Those, when a kid sits in there every single day for 100 and some days, and they're torquing on it, screws loose. Or, the welds start giving out. So we check that furniture. Same with cabinetry. When we start talking about all the cabinetry in a classroom. You see all the cabinetry at Little Prairie that went up, all those hinges, they're going through those and checking the screws and making sure everything's aligned. Plumbing inspections, going bathroom to bathroom, to shower to shower, to classroom, looking for drippy faucets, looking for drippy traps, looking for corrosion, because something you'll hear about in a little while, but our water softening systems are only softening our hot water side. So we have all this hard water going through our cold water side and creating issues. So the guys are constantly going in there, and if you actually, something that I increased for the next budget year is purchasing more and more plumbing parts, because the guys are capable of doing that. So I spent a lot on plumbing parts to allow them to do some of that work, so we didn't have to sub some of that out, but they're doing some of that. And they were always doing some of that, but we're doing more of it now. Door inspections, I don't know how many doors we have in this place, but actually going through, checking closers, checking the hardware. There's nothing better than a door that actually shuts and locks when we start talking about lockdown situations, so that's a safety thing. And then painting per, administrators' requests. We'll always try to take on some of the painting tasks during the summer months. And then lighting inspections and repairs. Right now, we couldn't do the LED lighting, right? So I already noticed we have some bulbs out. Gabe's been asking for some lighting supplies. We were trying to hold off on that in anticipation that if the referendum did pass, we wouldn't have had invested a bunch of money into stuff that was coming out shortly after. So,
one quick question, Andy. Over the course of the summer, have we historically used any lower price, recently graduated student labor as a way? Because I guess I think back to the 80s when some of us were the ones that got to scrape gum off the bottoms of desks and do all those things so that the people that really knew the buildings better could focus on things like, sanding the gym floor. Do we do anything like that as a way to knock out some of the, I don't want to call them grunt tasks, but that's what they called them when they had us do them?
I'm smiling a little bit because I was up north for the weekend, and I thought about that when I was out in the woods to add that to this slide, about who helps us, what our team looks like, and I never put that on there. So last year, we didn't have summer helpers because we shut down, so the custodians had ample time to do it without the summer help, and then not having to take on that at an expense of having summer help. So that was something that I've been meaning to talk to Kathy about, is that something we're going to continue to do? And then, because I think I need to get that out pretty soon and get those kids on board. But I can tell you, that's that situation, but I can tell you that Ryan Howley and his kids, they do a lot for our district as well. Just doing odds and ends, cleaning up leaves and things like that as well. So kind of like a community service situation. But I'll definitely be looking at that. I think Kathy is about to turn on her mic.
We definitely have used student workers in the summer still. Bob did always say he had trouble finding them now. Yep, but yes, he always put that request out there.
So, and it might become harder now, but we'll see. We'll get it out there now that I have the approval there. When you're starting to compete with big box stores, bringing in, hiring people at $13, $15 an hour, and we're hiring at $8 and I think $8.25. The kids are just doing it because it's cool. They want to do it with their friends, and we'll make it fun for them as well, for sure. In matter of fact, some of our custodians that we still have to this day that are part-time came from that group of kids. We have several high school graduates that stayed with us while they're going to college. So, but yeah, we'll definitely get a posting out there and maybe have Kent and Stacy help with recruiting. So this is a small list, okay, but what do we contract out? Fire alarm system inspections and repairs. You have to be licensed to do that stuff. I only know of a few districts that actually have somebody on staff licensed to do those sort of things. Tune-ups on gas-fired and refrigeration equipment. You know, again, we can do the bearings and we can do the belts and filters and that sort of thing, but you still want somebody licensed and knows the equipment better than us to go in there and do those sort of things. Roofing repairs, you know, we do have custodians with a bucket of roof patch that occasionally go up on the roof and do that, but they really are doing inspections, looking for issues, cleaning out the roof drains, looking for tenting, looking for rips that may have happened. It's amazing what you find after a winter. So they'll go and do some inspections, but we do work with a company to go in and do the roof repairs. Asphalt repairs, crack filling, I mentioned this earlier, it was on the list, you know, we sub that out. Concrete repairs or just complete concrete replacement. Electrical repairs, and I'm talking again medium to high issues. You know, we're not going to go in and replace a panel or change a big contactor or anything like that. Large flooring projects, you know, we do have one coming up. We have some VCT failing down the hall here. We patched it just to get by, but then we had it tested. It's got asbestos in the mastic, so that's a bigger project. So we're going to have to do an abatement, and then we're going to have to do, we're going to sub that out to have that replaced by a flooring contractor, and that's going to be happening during the summer of 21. Snow removal, plumbing repairs, you know, those are the ones that just came to my mind when I was making this.
Andy, I just want to comment on that too. I mean, they're contracted services, right? And I can appreciate people offering, volunteering, and we have a great community that offers a lot to us, and we try to take advantage of that. But I think there's a balance to everything too, right? I mean, and that is volunteering on these type of contracted services have to be looked at from two aspects of our organization, right? It has to be looked at from a liability of the person doing the work, that would be the volunteer. What happens if they get hurt while doing that, right? And the second one is the liability to the district if the work is not done properly. And even if the individual believes they've done it properly, if we haven't contracted the service and literally contracted it through the correct methodology, it'll end up, I think back to like the middle school HVAC units, if we were having somebody volunteering doing something with all the good intentions, but then if we ended up having a carbon monoxide issue in that middle school, I can tell you, it would not matter what our intent was. The liability would be huge. And you know what? They wouldn't be going after the individual who volunteered. They'd be going after the district, because the district's the one with the large insurance policies, right? And unfortunately, too, my bigger concern would be what occurred to the staff and students in the building, right? Forget the monies involved. So those are the balancing acts. I mean, these are things that, honestly, you look at and you think, could there be some volunteerism? Not on these type of contracted services. On other things, yes, and we've taken advantage of that. It's kind of like when people have mentioned to me if we could volunteer certain things that our current personnel already do. And I said, that's great if it frees up our current personnel to do other workloads, other job responsibilities. I could not agree more. If it can be done consistently, because it doesn't do any good to help volunteer for 1 month and then they have to take on those responsibilities later that we just gave them additional responsibilities to. And more importantly, I had to explain to somebody, and that was the structural deficit still. That if we're looking at it from a standpoint, oh, it's going to help your structural deficit, it doesn't. Because I would have to reduce the personnel to help the structural deficit. So if we're willing to reduce this personnel, it could help the structural deficit. But then we've got to have consistency of volunteering. And as I was trying to explain to one person, you're talking about volunteering, helping out in numerous different areas. They just don't do that one thing. That's 1/50th of their job. So then I would argue and say, now I got to find somebody who's going to coordinate all that to even make it happen. So it's just those components that I'm not saying I'm opposed to any of it. I'm saying there's always another little layer to it being successfully done.
So what upcoming work will be conducted by contracted services? So Kathy mentioned just a little while ago about the positive variance. Okay, so we started brainstorming and started looking at the project summary from the referendum and looking at timelines, because it is a short timeline to try to bid work. Like, I would love to have gone in and bid out some roofing, but again, building materials, trying to get a roofer that's gonna even do a decent sized section, or a section we can even afford to do, didn't seem feasible. Looking at parking lot maintenance, again, we would not probably be able to, because all this stuff, all the work from the positive variance has to be done by June 30th. It has to be invoiced by June 30th with completion, okay? So roofing was off the table, replacement of parking lot was off the table. So what projects could we move forward off of there? One of the big ones was replacing the boiler plant at the high school. Talking with the mechanical contractors, we right away got going, you know, started walking people through the building, demo companies, insulators, all that, so that everything could be competitively priced out. So we're able to move forward to that. The boilers that I select and I buy, and we don't have anybody buy those pieces of equipment for us, they were in stock one day out, okay? So I'm sure those have been delivered to the mechanical already. By June 30th, we will have the whole boiler system here at the high school replaced. That's the big one from the project summary. Wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for some of the budgeting efforts from this fiscal year. The domestic hot water system replacement. So again, aged equipment. We had more hot water heaters than we needed. On a specific side of the building, we had the kitchen hot water heater that's constantly running at 180 degrees, 24 hours a day. Just didn't need that. So not only are we going to replace the domestic hot water system, but we're going to add a booster heater to the kitchen dishwasher. Major energy savings with all this stuff. Again, we'll be working on incentives and credits back from Focus. Middle school, same thing. A dedicated hot water heater running at 180 degrees, 24 hours a day. And then when we start looking at the windows from the project summary, you know, we know that all these windows are the same age, and, you know, the ones at the middle school are single pane. So talking with one of our contractors that have a good relationship with, met with him just the other day. He can get the windows, and he's going to do the worst ones. And these are the worst ones. These are the ones that are drafty, that are starting to fall in. They have signs on them, do not open. You know, that's the ones we're replacing. So we have 2 at the middle school, and then we have 2 at the Prairie View. And then we did start the boiler replacement, because if you guys remember, we made a decision back, I don't remember when it was winter, that one of the boilers, it was going to be like 14 grand to just get the part to repair it. You know, that was a control board. So you guys gave the go ahead to start that boiler replacement plan. And that's all the funds for that boiler replacement. The 2 are in now. That came out of my budget. I reallocated, moved some money around, you know, deferred some projects, smaller projects, collectively making funds available for a big project. So we had those in, but part of the project that was with the referendum is to put a primary, secondary loop with new pumps and VFDs. Again, more energy savings. So we're moving forward with that. We can achieve and get that done before June 30th. And then district-wide. So this is a little more complicated. So we're always going to do our roof inspections and repairs. We're always going to do our parking lot maintenance and repairs. I wouldn't have been able to start that till July 1, okay? Now that I'm able to squeeze that in this fiscal year, now I have those funds available to do more with in the next fiscal year. So what am I targeting? I think I made another slide. Roofing, I did make another slide. So if I looked at that project summary of 42 roof sections, something like $3.8 million worth of roof sections, which, by the way, if that referendum would have passed, and this, I wish it did, right? But I don't know if the 3.8 million would have went very far, considering building material costs at the way they are. But my goal is, if I look at that roof plan that we have with our consultants, I identified the worst of the worst. So the ones that were in the project summary were the ones that were the worst, exceeded life expectancy, are now failing, and then the ones that are approaching life expectancy. I'm just taking the ones that are like the critical ones. We still have $600,000 worth of roof sections. So if over the next 5 years, depending upon this goes, I'm going to start bidding out, seeing what it's going to cost to do maybe 1 or 2 of these roof sections, so that maybe I can apply $100,000 to 1 or 2 roof sections next summer. Okay, that's a goal. I'm not making any promises, but I still have to resolve some of these issues, especially the ones that have moisture in the roof deck, in the insulation. And then the same with parking lots. You know, if I can do a couple roof sections, and if I can maybe try to do a a parking lot, like right now, the middle school is the worst of all the parking lots. If I can maybe, instead of looking at that as 3 sections, maybe looking at it as 8 sections and breaking it up into little pieces, then maybe we can start tackling that way. Is that a long-term solution? No, but it starts getting us through until maybe a long-term solution presents itself.
But by having a positive variance, it's allowing you to free up future budgets to other needs that you maybe didn't know you could address.
Yeah.
Not to the degree of what the referendum dollars would have, but phasing things in. And I think the big unknown, as we know, is, right, look how fast something can occur, such as what we're having to deal with at the middle school.
Yeah, so I
Right,
think
which
Kathy,
can totally detract, because I do think it's important to note that this isn't the first time we've had a positive variance. We try, obviously, Kathy does an incredible job preparing the budget with the help of everybody else giving input from a standpoint of trying to be conservative with our numbers, but meeting all of the needs of our district. But with that being said, and obviously we want to end with positive variance rather than negative by any means, but with that being said, I mean, this is how we've addressed other projects in the past for many years, many years. But we do it on this end of the spectrum rather than at the beginning in the budget, due to the fact we don't want to come in over budget. We would rather determine the needs on some maintenance projects each and every year, some different scale ones, in April and May, and still get them done in our current fiscal year, but not have already put them within the budget in September and be overage in April. And so this is the way in which we've been doing this and utilizing it all the time.
yeah, and finding out in mid-April that we have a positive variance doesn't help very well to do roofs and parking lots, like I said. But if I can, again, I'm somewhat redundant here, but alleviating the budget for next year allows me to apply monies that I had allocated. I can now clump those together and maybe do one bigger project, like a roof section. So, and I know Kathy's, we're talking about what other options are out there to start trying to put some money away to, not have to wait till April to make certain decisions. And so we'll always continue to have those conversations. And thanks for your time. Thank you thank you, Dale, for joining us, and Anna, you as well. I look forward to meeting with you and look forward to working with you guys this year. I did want to say that before we had some questions and answers. So anybody got questions?
So, you and me sat down a couple weeks ago, and I still have the list. So the boiler is now complete at the high school?
No, it'll be completed by June 30th.
Okay, so that one's ongoing. The windows at Prairie View,
We're going to do the worst of the Prairie View windows in the middle school windows.
are you gonna have to go back and do more?
Oh,
Or
yeah. Yeah, as
is
they
it gonna
fail.
be every year we're gonna have to replace them?
Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned that. So the goal is to try to do a few every year.
Okay,
Phase them as long as it takes to get them all replaced.
and then you're just taking that out of your operating budget right now?
Yes. So actually, just to be clear, like the windows, those are actually coming out of my budget, not the positive variance. There are some other projects I didn't bring up, but the reason I put those in there is because that was still a project summary from the referendum.
Okay, and the roofing, which we had as a number 3 priority, are you gonna be taking care of some of that out of your budget, or does that need to have funds for it, or?
That needs funds for. So the goal, again, is by using the positive variance that I was just given, that we collaborated and discussed what we can do with the positive variance. It does free up money for the 21-22 fiscal year. That the goal is to try to tackle some roof. Will we ever catch up on the roofing? No. Matter of fact, within the next few years, I might have tackled 3 to 4 roof sections when we had 42. We still might have 42 as
Yeah.
some of the other roof sections start exceeding or start failing, exceeding life
So
expectancy.
replacing the new roof, you did get a quote, and what was that, 3-4 million you said?
What's that?
What was the new quote for a roof on the building?
Yeah, it's not that simple. So based on the type of roof and the knowns through like core sampling, that sort of thing, 42 roof sections. I don't remember the square footage off the top of my head. So the roofing consultant that put our plan together based it on X amount of maybe $15 per square foot. Don't hold me to that.
Yeah.
So you basically calculate that by the square footage of the 42 roof sections. So we have 82 total roof sections in the district. 42 were identified for the project summary. Take that square footage, again, don't know it, that's where we came up with our $3.8 million number.
Okay, I just trying to get, I'm sorry, my point was,
3.9, 3.9.
is, it's going to be a continuing thing every year, and we're not in a situation where we have to replace the entire roof, but it's a continue maintenance every year. Is that correct, is saying that?
You are correct, that's what I discussed earlier in the presentation.
Okay, I just wanted to be, I wasn't sure, I wanted to be clear on that. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
All right.
All right, thank you, Andy.
Thank you for your time.
Glad you're responsible for all this. There's a lot to it. Sure. No, we appreciate it. Operational model timeline for the 21-22 school year?
Yeah, we've kind of already alluded to it. I just wanted to reiterate. So remember, there were our goal is absolutely going to be, as it was last year, to continue with 5 days per week of in-person learning. I do not want anybody thinking differently. That is what we are focusing on and going to work diligently on. And then determining whether or not how virtual learning looks, what it looks like, how it's provided, those type of things. It has a lot to be explored still with everybody. Basically making sure that we're able to meet our objective, which we're going to continue to keep at the forefront, which we said all along the board had approved last year, and that was to reduce exposure and mitigate the spread, while also providing learning environments that support the physiological and psychological health of our students and staff. And the core focus points that we will come back to you on will be the discussion of how is our operational model keeping safety at the forefront, keeping learning at the forefront, keeping equity at the forefront, adaptability, so how's the model adaptable, how's the model demonstrating that it's involving parent, community, and staff, and then also how's the model being communicated with clarity to families and to staff and everything else. So we'll continue to do that, and again, I just wanted to hit on the timeline will be, there's already work being done, quite a bit of work, and quite a bit of information being gathered. A recommendation will come forth with numerous, hopefully, ideas and options to me the week of May 24th. That'll allow us to kind of inquire more about it, investigate them, ask some questions, and then we're hoping by the week of June 7th, which is our board meeting, that we can come with a presentation to all of you in regards to that operational model, which then goes to what Anna stated earlier, and that is we can align that to other needs in our district so you guys can get an idea of where expenses and costs will be for this coming year.
Okay, sounds good. Spring sports and mitigation measures. Reed.
Hello. All right. So before I get into spring sports, just do want to update you on something that happened unfortunately today. We did have one student test positive with COVID-19 on our football team. Everything he did correctly. He got symptoms Friday, chose not to go to our football game, but because of where his symptoms fell, all of those close contacts from Wednesday and Thursday needed to be contacted. He felt fine Wednesday and Thursday. Friday came into school, just didn't feel quite right, told the coach. Coach said, go home. We put all these mitigation measures in, but unfortunately, we had to contact 35 of our students today that were within close contact of this player. So we have 43 players on the team, so there were only 8 of them that were not deemed a close contact with them. 2-way starter, multiple special teams. It just was this trickling snowball effect. But with that being said, the protocols that we've put into place and all of the mitigation measures that we have done and expectations that we've put on the coaches, we are, we identified 35 people. Talking with the student, he identified roughly 24, I think. It's kind of a blur from today, and then after talking with the coach got his practice plans out, again, did everything that we asked of the coaching staff to do, got that out, got his groups, and we identified 11 more students that we felt were probably within close contact or direct contact of that player. So we were aware that this could happen. Transmission can happen anywhere, but when we are dealing with athletics and especially a contact sport like football, you go from being able to socially distance. Yeah, it can work in some things, but to run an efficient football program and play in a football game, there is direct contact consistently. Parents were aware of the risk, students were aware of the risk, aware of the possibility that this could happen. Saying all of this, as difficult as today was, telling those 35 players that your season is done. Their last game was supposed to be Friday. We can't postpone it. We've had to do a quarantine with basketball, but we were able to reschedule. Season continued. We had 2 months to make up these games. The season is done for these players. I feel terrible for all of them, specifically our seniors who were expecting to play one last game. We can't postpone it. The WIA season that we could play a game is done next week Friday. We chose not to schedule an additional game just because of the overlap with all of our spring sports. Next week tennis starts, so if we would have went, it would have overlapped with each of our spring sports. Heavy one is baseball. Typically there's a lot of baseball players and football players that do both. So we made that decision to end, do one additional game, but not the two. But our students are going to be back into the building from their quarantine next Friday. And it's just not enough time for us to prepare for a game in a safe manner. So, again, providing these opportunities I think is so vitally important for the health and the mental well-being of these kids. I think today was a sign of that. Multiple tears by multiple students knowing that they weren't going to play one more football game. It was really difficult, but I think it shows the importance of providing these extracurricular activities to our students and doing so in the safest way that we all know how, because Lord knows we could probably talk for hours and hours and hours about what's right, what's wrong, but all we can do is do the best we can and provide a safe environment as possible while keeping some sort of sense of normalcy. So that's where we're at in regards to our football season, our alternative fall season. I'm going to be, I'm happy I don't have to use that term again.
Reed, if I can just interrupt you too, you did a great job with that presentation. A great job. I think it's just really important to recognize too that, so think about the number there affected, right, that are quarantined for 14 days. That's our live streaming. I mean, that's how those students will continue to be provided in-person learning for the next 14 days. So that goes to, again, the technology that we put forth, the access. Dale, you had inquired about that earlier, the access that some of those students possibly will need. So all those components have gone toward not only students that elected to be virtual all year, but have assisted us all year with students who have been identified as close contacts, to be able to allow them the opportunity to continue with in-person learning. And those are the decisions and discussions we can continue to have with our operational model for next year for budget.
So moving forward into the spring athletics, I'm going to talk specifically for Rock Valley Conference. I'll go over some of the things that might be slightly different for our non-conference contests. And if you have any questions or clarifications, just let me know. But all of these are the same for all of our spring sports. So baseball, softball, track and field, tennis, golf, soccer. So they're all the same. It is blanket. It is a blanket RVC COVID guidelines. So face coverings. All Rock Valley schools will abide by the following face covering guidelines. So spectators are required to wear face coverings at all times. This is a recommendation by the WIAA that all spectators, even though it's outdoors, are asked to wear face coverings. Officials, coaches, and guests are required to wear face coverings at all times. Again, this is the same recommendation that the medical advisory put together through the WIAA. Athletes must wear face coverings when in the dugout, when not playing, and when congregating as a group. Basically the same as what the WIAA said. The WIA's language was when individuals can't socially distance. So if the difference here is if we are able to socially distance outside in on our soccer field, I'll use that, that's our best example. If we're able to socially distance, if you're not in the game, the WIA is not recommending or saying they're recommending that you need to have a face covering. However, the Rock Valley Conference is. Not to jump back and forth, but we are going to be following the WIA recommendations for all of our non-conference events. For safety purposes, athletes are not required to wear face coverings while competing per WIA recommendations. Social distancing, athletes are to social distance. This includes using safe spaces outside of dugouts if necessary. WIA recommends that. So what you might see differently is dugout spaces, if possible, are going to be extended. You might see chairs, buckets, whatnot outside of that dugout in order to promote social distancing. So that's something that's going to look different from what you would normally see in the past. Spectators will need to spread out, potentially seated on their own lawn chairs, outfield, sideline fences. Families may cohort. This is what we've been doing since the fall, since we went into our fall sports with soccer, again, kind of those overlapping sports. But families are responsible for cohorting, staying in their own family circles, and then also responsible for social distancing. A maximum of 4 fans per athlete will be allowed, with some RVC schools allowing for some RVC schools allowing a maximum of 2 spectators. So some schools were comfortable with 4, others were only comfortable with allowing 2. This one is kind of all over the board within our conference. A school just reached out to me asking for a pass list for spectators. Some are doing that, some are not. We are not going to be asking for a pass list for a variety of reasons, primarily because of the location of our fields. It would be far too difficult to expect 1, 2, 3 supervisors to have pass lists and check people in, knowing if we're at the softball field, they could come from a variety of directions. So we are asking families to maintain the gatherings of 4 or less, which, including your coaches, let's say roughly that's 20 people, including your players, coaches, managers. They each get 4 people, 80 per team, 160 people. There's never been 160 people at a softball game. As much as I wish we had that support, there hasn't been. So as far as that number is concerned, same with baseball, we just don't see those numbers. So if we do get into a situation where we are hosting a regional and sectional tournament, I'm just going to need to get creative about doing what I need to do to make sure that our fans are safe, that our players are safe, that everybody involved is safe. But again, the four spectators per player and coach, we are not going to, nor have we ever exceeded that $160 person spectator limit. So, as far as social distancing, I don't know if any of you have been to football games this year, but we're going to do the same thing. Our bleachers currently have signs on the seats that designate socially distanced seating. We have signs as you walk in asking spectators to wear a mask as they come into the facility. So we're going to do the same thing at our baseball field. I'm still working it out with the village because those aren't our fields to see if they're okay with us labeling the bleachers. I probably need to do something different, just indicating that it is for specifically high school events, just because I know they use those fields for adult leagues and other leagues as well. So, so that is for the fans, spectators. Post-game event, this is nothing out of the ordinary, but everybody's encouraged to leave immediately following the contest. No high fives or handshakes will be allowed. Teams are to do their congratulatory wave or salute to the other team. So we've been doing that again since the fall. Water, visiting teams are required to bring their own water containers. At East Troy, every student athlete's going to have their own container. Some people are bringing water coolers and are doing that thing, but we are asking all of our athletes to have their own water bottle. Concession stands, this is going to be determined by the host school. Currently, we are not holding any concessions for any of our events for the remainder of this year. It's just another one is restrooms, porta potties are provided for everybody. We've done that here at East Troy. Since I've been here, every year I call Pat Services. They get a porta potty out at our tennis courts, softball field, and our baseball diamond because we don't have any restrooms out there. So, and then pep band and cheer and dance, that's just determined by any individual school. So I've notified those coaches and just let them know if they do want to perform. We're happy to accommodate that. Just let me know when. Okay. So that is the Rock Valley Conference protocols. I kind of indicated which ones we will be following and then which ones we're not really going to follow when it comes to non-conference events. So any questions with that?
No, sounds good. Thank you, Reed.
All right, thank you.
All right, move on to reports. Dr. Hibner, you have anything?
I do not.
Kathy? Amy's not here. Does anybody want to cover her summer school, or does she want to do that when she comes back?
You know what? She did speak to me. Sorry. I was like, no, she doesn't. No. So for just the summer school, she said that she would be bringing it up at the next school board meeting on the 10th, and that she wanted you guys to know that the summer school team, did allow registration to be open until this Friday. It was supposed to close previously, but they wanted to extend it due to the fact to allow families more of an opportunity to register. She said at this time it looks like, and I'll let her report out on it, but it looks as if, per the data right now, that we're in a better spot than we were last year for summer school, but we still have not reached where we were 2 years ago.
Sure.
So hence the extension of time.
Okay. All right, Kate, anything tonight? All right, and I have nothing to report on, so we'll move on to policy review and development. Second reading of 451, district wellness policy. Does anybody have any questions or?
I did try to amend the section from the last meeting. It's on the top of page 62, describing what advertising, what marketing would occur. So I did try to clarify. I can just read it here. Non-Smart Snacks food may be sold per Smart Snacks guidelines after the end of the school day or as an exempt fundraiser. In such cases, marketing that occurs directly with the sale of such food is allowed. Examples of allowed marketing include but are not limited to exteriors of vending machines, food and beverage containers, posters reflecting the fundraiser, etc. Marketing not directly associated with the allowable sale of a non-Smart Snacks food will not be allowed. Examples of marketing of non-Smart Snacks food not allowed include but are not limited to school supplies, educational materials, food service equipment, school equipment, message boards, scoreboards, signs, uniforms, advertisements in school publications, mailings, sponsorships of school activities or sports teams, educational incentive programs such as contests or programs, and free samples or coupons displaying advertising of a product. So trying to, again, bridge that gap of that if you're selling a non-Smart Snack food, again, let's say it's 7 o'clock at night at a basketball game, the container it's in might say Pepsi-Cola, and that's okay. But we're not going to have a large Pepsi-Cola sign on the football field. Again, If you want to go there, we can, but this is the direction that DPI is promoting for wellness, and again, trying to overall for the students in school not have unhealthy food advertisements in reflection for them.
Okay.
So I have a quick question about regarding that. So it's something, is it a rule that we have to abide by, or is it if we do it, does it,
Yep.
what
So
happens?
Smart Snacks is a USDA rule, but the marketing is not a rule. So as a board, you could decide, sure, we are going to allow Pepsi to advertise.
So there's no repercussion from DPI or anybody else for that?
Not on the marketing.
Okay.
Again, if you were trying to sell Pepsi during lunch at school, then there would be repercussions like taking away our federal funding eventually.
Okay.
But the marketing is your choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that policy? It'll come
So
back.
that's really the discussion for this board. I mean, is the key, I think, on that is the after-school day in regards to where you want to go with advertising or following the wellness policy, because we need to have the two align, right? And we can't say, well, we want this from a healthy standpoint, but then on the advertising policy state, but we're going to accept any and all advertising as long as it meets certain requirements, but outside of even the healthy smart stacks. I think that's where we have to decide as a district, and you guys need to as the board, about what do you want within those. As Kathy's saying, she's like, this is the recommendation on this policy, but if you're thinking the opposite for advertising, then they don't align. And then we need to think about that. I will be honest, I made the comment, I just whispered to Pete, I said, I'm all up for DPI or others telling, like, we really are highly recommending this, but I really want then the proper funding, so we wouldn't have to worry about the advertising component.
I know, but recall DPI doesn't create the funding.
No, DPI does not create
Right.
the funding, I get
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, DPI fights for the funding, I understand that, but I'm just saying, it is another recommended, it's not a mandate, but it's another recommendation, I understand where that recommendation comes from, but it's difficult when schools are in financial difficulties not to be accepting advertising. That's all. I don't blame DPI by any means.
It's a difficult balance. This is the struggle that we have balancing a lot of things, like accepting outside resources versus trying to, again, promote healthy foods. We have conflicting things that we're trying to balance all the time. Like one thing may seem like a great idea, and then another group views it as not a great idea. So that's our world.
Well, and I think where we are now is probably where we need to be going forward. And certainly if Pepsi-Cola came to us and said, we're willing to write a check for $100,000 to put a sign on the scoreboard on the football field, that puts us in a more difficult decision. But I've spent some time doing some reading since our last meeting on this, and one of the things that I keep coming back to is having the money is nice. I mean, nobody here would disagree with the fact that we could find lots of things to use those funds for. But it's awfully hypocritical to say to our athletes, for example, you need to spend your 2 hours going through the life of an athlete presentation where we talk about the dangers to your body without proper diet, and then all of a sudden, there's a $100,000 Pepsi sign. And I don't think we're going to get a $100,000 Pepsi sign, but I don't want to have to explain to people why we're okay with Pepsi being out there. And I'm picking on Pepsi just because I'm a Coke guy. But I think there's a hypocrisy if we start to cross that line and go in that direction. And I think quite frankly, it puts our educators like Linda Dodge in a very difficult position to sit and teach health class and say, hey, think about the things you're putting in your body, but ignore on the scoreboard that big meal ticket that we picked up. And if you look, even if you look at the psychological
things, the studies that are being done now that are saying just the constant barrage. I mean, one of the things that I've seen repeatedly in the last couple weeks is the fact that schools have now become, because they've become more mindful generally, have become one of the few places where kids are not getting constantly barraged by those unhealthy messages. So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
I understand that. I think what would be helpful from my lens would be for that to be clear. So I think Pepsi's a great example of, it'd be hard to argue that that's healthy and in the ground.
Mhm.
But what about something that's not so clear? So maybe like a local restaurant, or, maybe they sell some healthy things and some not. And we have the yearbook which has ads in it, we have programs which have ads in it. So if people want to buy advertisements and put it in there, you can do that if you own a car dealership, but if you own a restaurant, we don't want that.
Mhm.
It just gets a little gray. So maybe the more clear we can be, the easier it can be for us.
Our advertising policy does attempt to do that. It's
Yeah.
a little bit. I mean, we updated that advertising policy, I think a year ago, got revised too, to try to provide a little more clarity to restaurants and all of that. So I know we worked through that, but trust me when I tell you, as much as we work through the clarity, it's not always clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this can in some ways contradict that, which causes issues.
Yeah.
Especially related to the calorie count or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
How about if some promise of like diet soda? Is that better than regular soda or water? Or maybe a restaurant advertises salads or something like that. Some kind of something that people feel comfortable with. I mean, we're not advertising the sugary soda, we're advertising the diet soda, or we're advertising the water, or we're advertising maybe the milk or skim milk, or maybe the restaurant's advertising their salads or whatever, something along that route.
Yeah, and if the
Does that work?
if the food qualifies for smart snacks, then the marketing's allowed. And the smart snacks, there's a calculator that you have to put the food in, and so generally, yes, diet and salads would qualify.
So if you had a Pepsi sign up there that said Diet Pepsi, you're good then, right? Am I wrong?
If they're gonna market themselves as Diet Pepsi,
So drink Diet Pepsi, so.
yeah. But yeah, to Stacy's point, we do, and then Chris brought it up, in the advertising policy, we've said no advertisements may be permitted which promote drug use, tobacco products, vaping, alcoholic beverages, gambling, obscene sexual or pornographic materials, weapons, or any products, services, or activities which are illegal or inappropriate for minors or a school community audience. This policy does not prohibit advertisements from establishments that sell products or services listed above, but whose business is not solely dependent on the sale of products or services listed above. The name of the business shall not be determinative with regard to the application of this policy. So we also have that for like your local restaurants and things that
Yeah,
are.
that's where it did stem from, right? We had some restaurants that came out and seek to assist the district and seek through advertisements and different programs or anything else, boards, and we had to add that language. We had a lot of discussion, I remember, at a board level, because at first it was just about alcoholic beverages. Well, but then we started saying, look, I mean, there are numerous restaurants who serve an alcoholic beverage too, but it doesn't mean that they're promoting alcohol. They're a restaurant and they're serving food, but they happen to also provide. So that's where that additional language came in, where we said, look, as long as it's not their primary main product.
And I'll just say here too, this policy is about way more than advertising. The Wellness Committee spent a good deal of time on the wellness policy. I'm sorry that I've kind of angled it to that. I just thought that would be the most controversial item based upon past board discussions. But there's a lot of other things in the wellness policy I want to make sure you're good with too. So if you can take time again, read it before the third reading, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, policy 851, advertising in the schools, along the same lines. And we also have the second reading of the policy 500s, which is a bunch of small changes that every year we go through. So if there's no other questions on any of those policies, you'll see them again next meeting. All right, Communications announcements. Oh, okay. Future items for the board. Does anybody have anything you'd like to see on a future agenda?
I would just like one thing, Chris, if you could add to the May 10th meeting, I would like to talk about, and I know it's a couple months down the road, but we voted last meeting about masks for summer school. I would like to have a conversation about whether that's a good thing or not, seeing as the low amount of students that are there, and so.
Anybody else have any other future items you'd like to see on an agenda?
I'd like to continue to talk about energy savings and see if we can kind of brainstorm on energy savings and things like that.
It might be more of a thing to meet with Andy and maybe come back with a recommendation to the board.
I
instead
guess
of
I can
just
do that.
Open
I can-
discussion might
Yeah, I
lead
can
into
meet,
a lot of areas.
yeah, I'll meet with Andy. I will
Okay.
do that.
Yeah, maybe a combined effort to kind of come back to the board with, here's some things we'd like to look at in the future. I think that'd be great.
That could also lead to the operations subcommittee,
Yep,
which Dale and Bob, Dale and Steve are on, so
sure.
could lead to that.
Let me ask this question, and I guess I'm not going to say I want this specifically on an agenda at this point, but I think we know what we've been through in the last 6 months, bringing the last referendum up, going through the process, having it fail. There was a lot of work that went into that, obviously, doing legwork in front of it to try and make sure that we were getting the right questions out to voters. At what point do we maybe think about forming another ad hoc group of some type and actually starting to ask some of those questions again? Because there were issues raised, whether we like them or not, there were issues raised during that process. And I think that, I don't know if another referendum is going to be the right answer. I don't really see a way around it, but I think before we do that, maybe it's time we invite people who are interested to throw their names in and actually have some discussion, because, we look around the room tonight and it's all the same faces who are always here, and yet we don't want to not hear what people are saying. And I guess at what point do you think we maybe extend that invitation and invite people to become a part of a group like that, so that as we look down the road to November or to next April, we can start to craft some additional possibilities that might be a better fit?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea to start that again. There's contingents on both sides. Bring them together, maybe a solution can be found that's amenable to everybody.
Yeah.
We wish Congress would do that, but of course it never happens. But if we can do that here, I think that would be wonderful.
Well, and I mean, I think, and I'm sure everybody else up here heard this too. We didn't get a lot of feedback. We got a lot of feedback from the ad hoc board. We didn't get a lot of feedback from people that weren't pro-referendum, or at least open to the referendum, until after the questions were written. And by that time, it was too late. We didn't have the ability, once we submitted the questions, we didn't have the ability to make any other adjustments. And I think that, for the sake of being fiscally prudent and putting a better question or set of questions out there, if that's the route we choose to go, I guess I'd like to feel like we're hearing from the people that think that it's, the people that had differences of opinion last time. Now is the time to have those conversations for exactly that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to communicate with the community better. The board, the district needs to communicate with the community, and I don't know what the mechanics are of that, but there has to be an improvement, a relationship with the community that doesn't exist at this point. So I don't know what that is. I don't have the answer to that, but I do know the need is there to have this relationship with the community. The district needs to have this, and it doesn't have it at this point. So that's one thing, and then the other thing is the fundraising ability. If we're allowed to do the fundraising ability, and so I think there's some things we can do to improve the financial situation of the district. I really believe we can, and I also believe that if we really dig down deep and maybe we can find areas of savings and, you know, be more conscientious about it and expand maybe something where we can make money at. For example, maybe we can, you know, market our skilled trades or have a class for the skilled tradesmen that are working in the factories around here to give them update, and maybe we can charge them for that, you know, just throwing that all out there to, you know, if you get something going, because you can ask for something, but unless the community feels that you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing, which I have gotten many letters, by the way, I don't talk about it too much, but I've gotten some that feel that they aren't. So the communication between the district and the community has to be fixed. I don't know how to fix it, but it has to be fixed.
Well, for a future item, I know you got a lot coming up with an operational model for the fall and a lot of things to tie up loose ends for this school year. What would be a good time frame to put that on, back on the agenda to start talking about a ad hoc committee and discussing these topics? I don't think so.
I've only got the one on the 7th listed, but
I don't see it either. Yeah, August and April.
I would say, is it all right if we put that ad hoc surveys, ad hoc, and then talk about ad hoc group and surveys and everything else to get proper feedback, start forming feedback in person and through surveys with the community? Could we talk about that in July? Is that all right?
I think that'd
Yeah.
probably be fine.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, nothing else for open set or future meeting? Okay, I think we are done.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
I
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.